Chapter 374. After dealing with Duan Zhengji, Ling Han obviously did not need to disguise himself anymore. He swayed along the way, and when Ling Han arrived at the extreme Yang city, his cultivation had already reached the middle stage of the third layer of the spiritual ocean tier. However, the bad news was that all his origin crystals had been completely spent, and he was now really penniless. Guang Yuan's cultivation also fell to the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier. After cultivating for more than a month, he had just stepped into the second layer, which was about the same as Qin Yi. Even if these two people refined essence crystals day and night, they could only provide 2 pieces a month, and they were only 1 star. So sad. Ling Han sighed. When he entered the extreme Yang city, he handed over the last piece of origin crystal he had on him as the registration fee for entering the city. As long as he registered once, he would not have to pay any fees when he entered the city again in the future. To save money, he didn't even let Lu Yutong and the others come out. Now, the first step was not to find the 2 main ingredients for the spirit supplement pill, but to first earn money. If he didn't have money, did he have to steal or rob? That would require him to have the strength to do so. The extreme Yang city was the economic core of the entire North region. This place was extremely bustling, and 2 colossal entities sat there, the Alchemist Society and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. The headquarters of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion was still called the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. But the place where the Alchemist Guild was located was called the North Pill Hall. It occupied close to 1/10 of the entire city, and a large number of martial artists and alchemists resided there. There was also a huge medicine field that provided alchemists' daily alchemy needs. It was said that this herb field was enveloped by a super large spirit gathering array, causing the spiritual energy in the herb field to be incomparably dense, and promoting the growth of the spirit herbs. In order to maintain the operation of this spirit-gathering formation, an astonishing amount of origin crystals was consumed every day. Perhaps even the Winter Moon sect would feel a chill in their hearts when they saw this number. In terms of wealth and grandeur, there were 2 great forces in the North region, the Alchemist Society and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Only these 2 great forces could burn origin crystals like this. When Ling Han heard this, he couldn't help but feel an itch in his hands. He really wanted to enter the medicine field of the North Pill Palace, pull out a few stalks of every kind of spirit grass, and transplant them into the Black Tower to perfect his medicine field. In the Black Tower, that was a real medicinal field. Think too much. Make money, make money. Ling Han planned to open an alchemy shop and a restaurant to provide him with an endless supply of crystals. High-grade medicinal pills could indeed be sold for high grade through auctions, but the problem was that the rarer something was, the greater its value. If too many were taken out, the price would naturally fall. Furthermore, the amount of essence crystals that Ling Han required was an astronomical figure. No matter how much he had, it would never be too much. Therefore, not only did he need to take out some high-level medicinal pills from time to crazily collect origin crystals, he also had to make a steady stream of origin crystals and collect origin crystals unceasingly. All things were difficult at the beginning, and a single coin stumped a hero. Ling Han did not even have a single origin crystal, so he could only start from scratch. He first plucked some ginseng from the Black Tower, and ran to a pharmacy to sell it. As a result, the pharmacy tried its best to lower the price. He was so angry that he switched to another pharmacy, but the result was the same. He was an outsider, and his cultivation was only at the spiritual ocean tier, so of course he would take the opportunity to kill him. In the desolate north, the spiritual ocean tier was a cornerstone, but in the extreme Yang city, only spiritual pedestal tier warriors could be called elites, and flower blossom tier warriors could receive true respect. It couldn't be helped. Who asked the extreme Yang city to be the economic center of the North region? There were quite a few flower blossom tier elites here, and if it was only here, people would think that it was too easy to break through to the flower blossom tier. He switched to a few pharmacies, but the situation was about the same. Ling Han could only bear the pain and sell the ginseng cheaply. One had to know that they had been planted for almost 2 months, and the medicinal age of these ginseng was almost 300 years. You'll regret it. Ling Han noted it down. In the future, he would definitely open a branch next to every pharmacy and steal all their business. Ling Han could be very childish sometimes. With the starting capital, Ling Han immediately opened the pharmacy and restaurant. This was very simple. He could directly buy the ready-made ones, and there was no need to renovate them. Thus, 2 days later, his pharmacy and restaurant were already open for business. Lu Yutong was in charge of the restaurant, while Li Sichuan was in charge of the pharmacy. The restaurant was called Unforgettable, meaning that as long as one ate it once, they would never forget the taste, coming back again and again. The pharmacy was called Alchemist King Hall. With Ling Han's ability, this was not an exaggeration. He indeed had such ability. Since he wanted to earn money, then he naturally had to make a name for himself. But after opening for 2 days, the business of the 2 shops was not very good. In the restaurant, Ling Han took out some vegetables, fruits, and dried meat from the Black Tower. He had plenty anyway, but these ingredients were only used on some high-end dishes and needed to be paid with origin crystals. However, when a new shop had just opened, the people who came to join in the fun were only some ordinary people. They ate ordinary food and wine and paid with silver. High-end dishes could not be sold at all, so how could they earn origin crystals? It was the same for pharmacies. Though the name Alchemist King Hall was domineering, it was only a joke. Moreover, no one dared to eat alchemical pills indiscriminately. Before a good reputation was established, who would come to buy alchemical pills? It was impossible even if it was a little cheaper. Moreover, Ling Han did not want to fight for the market through a price war. The medicine of the Alchemy Emperor could be sold cheaply. Did he have to advertise his name as an earth-grade alchemist? Ling Han shook his head. The Thousand Corpse Sect's tentacles reached the desolate north and the Winter Moon Sect, so it was hard to guarantee that there were no spies or branches of the Thousand Corpse Sect here. Ling Han ruined the plans that the Thousand Corpse Sect had plotted for many years in the Fallen Moon Gorge, so it was very easy for them to investigate him. If he advertised openly, then as long as the Thousand Corpse Sect had spies here, they would definitely come to make trouble for him. It should be impossible for them to kill him, but they could cause trouble for his business, which was something he did not want. He changed his strategy and had the restaurant release a limited number of dishes every day, all made from vegetables grown in the Black Tower, for free tastings. Only 2 days later, the restaurant's business suddenly became shockingly hot. Word of mouth spread, and more people came here, among which there was no lack of powerful martial artists. And as long as they tasted those delicacies, they naturally could not forget them, and were willing to fork out large amounts of spirit crystals to spend. These delicacies were sold at a very high price. One dish cost 1 origin crystal, and those with meat were even more expensive, costing 10 origin crystals. Moreover, Ling Han had not yet released the meat of the demonic beasts raised in the Black Tower, so the price could be increased tenfold. However, demonic beasts were relatively rare, so Ling Han only planned to let his own people eat them, and did not plan to sell them. When the restaurant's business improved, Ling Han directed these customers to the pharmacy, and in this way the pharmacy's business also improved. And although most of the alchemical pills in the pharmacy were concocted by Li Sichuan, the most valuable ones were concocted by Ling Han, and as long as they were used, everyone said they were good. In only 10 days' time, the 2 shops earned a steady stream of origin crystals for Ling Han, and the amount was extremely considerable. However, great wealth moved people's hearts. Ling Han had no backing and was also a newcomer, yet he earned so much money, so how could he not attract jealousy? A young man came to the restaurant and asked for half of the profits. Chapter 375. A minute later, Ling Han switched to the second position. Ka. The bones in his body once again made explosive sounds, as if they were frying soybeans. Even though he had now cultivated body of iron sheet, and the hardness of his bones was comparable to rare metals of the same level, he still felt like they were about to break. Because he had forcibly assumed such a position, it was equivalent to him going against himself with all his strength. Not to mention rare metals that were comparable to the same level, even divine metals would similarly break. However, in this strange position, his flesh and bones seemed to each possess a life of their own, madly absorbing the accumulated energy and transforming it into his own power. However, it wasn't origin power, but rather the brute force of his physical body. His muscles obviously didn't bulge, but he still felt that every cell was filled with vitality, and with a slight burst he could collapse a tall mountain. This was obviously an illusion. He had just started cultivating body art, so how could there possibly be such a shocking effect? However, once he truly cultivated it and his physical body became divine, that punch would have the power of 9 true dragons, which was extremely terrifying. Ling Han switched to the third position. Ka ka ka, his bones continued to make explosive sounds. He coughed up blood, but the blood was actually black, and there were some impurities inside which made him involuntarily shocked. This effect was too obvious, wasn't it? His body was sweating like rain, and his hair was completely wet. Drops of sweat dripped down, and there was steam rising, forming waves of white steam. Hunyo found it interesting and also imitated his position. Ouch, ouch, ouch. The little girl immediately complained incessantly, and hurriedly sat down on the ground. With a bitter expression she said, "It's not fun, not good at all." Ling Han wanted to laugh. So it turned out that this little bewitching girl was not a freak of nature no matter where she was. 12 minutes later, he had done every position once, and a pool of sweat had already formed on his body. His whole body was completely drenched. He changed his position and returned to the first position. Naturally, he had to do it for enough time. The energy essence inside his body was continuously being absorbed by his body. It was very strange. When he circulated the 5 elements heaven grade skill, this energy essence turned into origin power and was stored in his Dantian spiritual sea. Now it was being absorbed by every cell in his body and turned into pure brute force. Whether it was origin power or brute force, was there any difference? Ling Han had heard before that there were some beings that were born gigantic, and their adult bodies could even be the size of a city. They did not need to cultivate at all. With a punch or a kick, they would be able to collapse a tall mountain. It was like a human to an ant. From the ant's perspective, how high did it have to cultivate to be able to contend with the brute force of a human? Was the 9 dragons tyrant body art created by some gigantic beings that were born to be born? They specialized in the path of body cultivation and used their physical bodies to become immortals? Ling Han suppressed the distracting thoughts in his mind and focused on guiding the blood, flesh, tendons and bones in his body to absorb the drifting energy and turn it into his brute force. He had really eaten too much good food these few days, so the power that was transformed was also very frightening. It made him feel as if he was going to explode, and his whole body was swollen. After an hour, Ling Han stopped and sat down on the ground, panting heavily. This was really too tiring, but his whole body felt indescribably comfortable, forming a very strange feeling. After sitting for a while, he entered the Black Tower, took a bath, changed into a new set of clothes, and then tested out his brute force. It was comparable to element gathering tier. Heavens, he had only cultivated for an hour, and he had directly crossed over a whole tier of martial arts. Ling Han nodded. This was because he was standing at a different height. At this time, he was already in the spiritual pedestal tier, and had eaten so many great tonics. When these things were released, how could it still not be enough for a normal person to immediately cross over to the body refining tier? On the contrary, if you let a body refining tier martial artist eat so many tonics, he would have long been stuffed to death. However, the beginning was fast because I am already in the spiritual pedestal tier. My progress should not be so fast in the future, Ling Han said to himself. He cracked a smile. Body arts would be one of his trump cards. In future, who would think that he was at the end of his tether? But he would suddenly explode with a terrifying brute force, which would be able to turn the tables in a single move. He exited the Black Tower and started a fire to cook with Hunyo. Now that he had an additional expense, his desire for food was becoming more and more intense. In future, the Black Tower will have to rear more demonic beasts, Ling Han said. Otherwise, it would really not be able to support his and Hunyo's stomachs. Hunyo expressed deep agreement, drooling as she stared at Ling Han. That egg can't be eaten, Ling Han said hurriedly. The little girl was still unwilling to give up, and had not forgotten the egg of the azure flame eagle. Hung stingy. Hunyo pouted, but when the food was cooked, she immediately began to eat happily. When they were about to finish eating, they saw someone climb up from below with great difficulty. It was Shenzhong Cheng. He really did not think that the one who charged to the third place was not a flower blossom tier warrior of the older generation, nor was it the top of the young prodigy roll, but the white-robed sword king who had only charged to the 8th place this year. Ling Han nodded. These 3 stages actually did not test strength. Of course, if it was a monster like Ling Han and Hu Niu, who obviously only had the cultivation of the second or third layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but whose strength was comparable to the ninth layer, then that would be another matter. Overall, this stage was still a test of one's resilience. Spiritual pedestal tier cultivators had long since opened up their spiritual ocean, and their origin power was endless. Moreover, they had constructed a spiritual pedestal, which could almost reach the heavens. Climbing like this would definitely not exhaust one's strength. However, the gravity was too strong, and it was very easy for one to feel tired. Thus, who was fast and who was slow depended on each person's willpower. If you had to rest after every few steps, how could you possibly be fast? This swordsman's gaze was like a sword, flickering with an extraordinary splendor of tenacity and decisiveness. Obviously, he would definitely not stop until he reached the end. His body was like Ling Han's from before, covered in sweat, and his hair was completely drenched. However, when a man sprinkled sweat, not only did it not give others the feeling of being in a sorry state, it instead exuded an endless air of masculinity. Men should be like this. Ling Han dispelled the idea of inviting Shen Zhongcheng over to rub him together. If Shen Zhongcheng squeezed out all the tenacity in his body, it was very possible that he would win a great explosion. Either his cultivation level would soar, or he would obtain a great breakthrough on the path of the sword. Hu Niu, we can't be lazy anymore. Let's charge to the top in one go, he said. Charge! Hu Niu waved her small fist. The two of them also began to climb again. Their strength surpassed their cultivation level by too much, and in this place the gravity that each person had to bear was determined by their cultivation level. Thus, the two of them were ridiculously fast, and in an instant they had surpassed Shen Zhongcheng. Yet Ling Han sighed. He was too relaxed, so relaxed that he could not squeeze out the limits of his body. Then, he would not be able to achieve the effects of tempering. What a pity. But on the other hand, that was also because he had long since raised his limits above this level, which was why he could be so relaxed now, having already passed through this process. When he thought of it that way, his heart felt better. Chapter 376. Ling Han leisurely walked downstairs, swept his eyes over the room full of black-robed men, smiled and said, "It's lunchtime now. Everyone either start ordering or get lost. Don't affect my business." Fuck. Can't I study the menu a little longer and think about what to eat? Someone immediately slammed the table and shouted, "That's right, what kind of lousy restaurant is this? They don't even allow people to read the menu, forcing people to order. Is this a big restaurant bullying its customers?" Someone sneered. "We're not to be trifled with, so how do you want to bully us? Waiter, come here and read out the menu for me again. Read it clearly, don't speak so incoherently." A waiter trembled as he walked over. He was only a waiter and received a poor salary, so he really didn't want to get involved in this. However, a gushing spring tier elite was pointing at his nose, so how could a normal person like him dare not go over? He read out the menu. "Louder, did you not eat?" The black-robed man immediately shouted. The waiter could only raise his voice and read out the menu loudly. "How dare you, you actually dare to spit at me?" The black-clothed man glared at the waiter. Pa! A slap landed on the waiter's face, causing 3 of the waiter's teeth to fall out. The waiter was slapped so hard that his head was spinning. 3 waiters hurriedly walked up and supported him. They all looked at the black-robed man with angry expressions, but didn't dare to speak. "You can't bully people like this. What, you still dare to glare at me?" The black-robed man glared back at them, showing his ferocity. Hee hee. The other black-robed men laughed. To them this was just a farce. Ling Han strode over, a leisurely smile still on his face, and arrived in front of the black-robed man. "You're the manager, so come and read out the menu for me." The black-robed man stared fiercely at Ling Han. The order they had received was to intimidate the people in this restaurant as much as possible. Go to hell. Ling Han reached out and pressed down on his head, slamming it into the table. With a loud bang, the table made of yellow pear wood was immediately smashed into pieces. The black-clothed man immediately fell to the ground, clutching his head and groaning. Even if he was in gushing spring tear, being pressed down by Ling Han like that was still uncomfortable. He felt as if his head was about to explode. Shwa, at least 90% of the black-clothed men stood up, and there were only 7 spiritual ocean tier black-clothed men seated. They were still calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. How dare you act so violently? Those men in black all glared at Ling Han fiercely. You call this acting fierce? Hey, you guys are really ignorant. Ling Han shook his head. He stomped his foot down, and the head of the black-clothed man on the ground immediately sank into the floor. He was in a kneeling position, and his buttocks were raised high, as if he was waiting for sex. Chong, 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 the standing black-clothed men all drew their weapons, all of them looking furious. Hunyo immediately bared her teeth at the people around her. The little girl was the real savage one, and her large eyes were already filled with killing intent. In her mind there was no law, no reason, and no rules. Whoever treated her and Ling Han well was merely not an enemy, but whoever treated them badly was an enemy. Wild beasts treated their enemies with only slaughter. Take him down, strip him naked and hang him at the door for everyone to admire, a black-clothed man called out. That's a good idea. But we have to give him a beating first. He actually dared to injure our people. Go. Immediately, 8 people brandished their weapons and slashed over. When Hunyo saw this, she instantly leapt down from Ling Han's body and attacked. Pong, 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 her weapons danced, and the 8 people were instantly knocked down, lying on the ground and groaning. This was naturally Hunyo showing mercy, because Ling Han shook his head at her, not allowing her to kill. Although the little girl was very unhappy, she would not disobey Ling Han's orders. Seeing Hunyo so ferocious, the 7 spiritual ocean tier martial artists could not sit still and all stood up. It was merely a newly opened restaurant, and the owner was an outsider who had just arrived, so what background or strength could he possibly have? Thus, for the 7 of them in the spiritual ocean tier to move out, it should have been a sure thing, but Hunyo's strangeness was something even they couldn't see through. I'll do it. A black-clothed man in the spiritual ocean tier made a move, grabbing towards Hunyo. Invincible little tiger fist. Hunyo somersaulted in the air, her speed so fast that she was like a flash of light, already appearing behind the black-clothed man. Her small fist smashed pong, instantly causing the man to stagger and spit out a mouthful of blood. Ling Han could not help but smile. Hunyo now had another attribute of being playful. Together, the remaining 6 spiritual ocean tier martial artists were all shocked and hurriedly rushed forward. For a group brawl like this, people with some status and pride would definitely disdain, not to mention that the opponent was only a little girl. But these 6 people were all servants, so how could they have the bearing of an elite? If one person could not beat her, then they definitely had to attack together. Pride and whatnot, was that something edible? Hunyo was calm and unafraid. Her small figure darted left and right, swaying here and there. Her speed was so fast that even Ling Han, who did not open the Eye of Truth, couldn't capture her movements, not to mention these 6 people. In just a few moves the 6 people were all defeated. Hunyo jumped happily, looking like she was very powerful. The other black-clothed men all bared their teeth. It's over, they've kicked an iron plate. Before this, they thought that this restaurant was opened by a small martial artist in the Gushing Spring tier, and at most 1 or 2 spiritual ocean tier martial artists in charge. 7 of them came at once, so it should be enough to suppress them. Indeed, the other side only sent 2 spiritual ocean tier martial artists, but they were too fuck you fierce, torturing their 7 elites like dogs. What a fuck you. Run, go report to young Master Lang. Someone wanted to escape, but saw that Ling Han was smiling at them. I told you guys to leave just now, but you didn't. Now it's too late. Ling Han moved, slapping one person over with a single slap. Instantly, all of them were lying on the ground. Those waiters were all dumbfounded, thinking that their boss was actually so fierce. Then as long as they made a name for themselves in this battle, they would definitely not dare to come and make trouble in the future. But they were also a little worried. The extreme Yang City was a place of crouching tigers and hidden dragons, and even spiritual ocean tier martial artists could only be considered small fries. Young Master Han, how should we deal with them? Zhu Wuzhou asked. Tie them all up and hang them at the door, Ling Han said calmly. This will affect our business, Zhu Wuzhou said hesitantly. A normal person would definitely avoid trouble, but would they still dare to enter after seeing such a scene? No matter, let them see our strength, Ling Han said. As an earth-grade alchemist, what need was there for him to be afraid? He smiled faintly at the waiter who had been beaten previously, and said, "Go to the cashier's counter and collect 10 silver coins. In future, your wages will be doubled." "Thank you, sir." That waiter was instantly happy. 3 teeth could be exchanged for so many benefits, so it was worth it. Chapter 377. This time there were a total of over 40 black-robed men. Every 10 people formed a skewer, hanging from the 3rd floor of the restaurant like grasshoppers. There were a total of 5 skewers and the scene was quite spectacular. Many people were pointing and gossiping outside the restaurant. Some were bustling, some were making jokes, but those black-robed men naturally became the laughingstock. However, there were indeed many bustling people, but no one entered the restaurant to eat, because they all recognized the identity of these black-robed men. They were from the Lang clan, a spiritual pedestal tier 4, so how could they let it go so easily? Thus, the Lang clan would definitely send people over later, and if they entered to eat, they would naturally be affected. They wouldn't starve to death even if they skipped a meal, right? But after a while, a young man in embroidered clothes strode over. When he saw the skewers of human meat hanging from the restaurant, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He walked into the restaurant and said with a smile, "Interesting, really interesting. Guest, how many are you?" A waiter immediately went up to greet him. "Just this young master alone." That young man found a seat and sat down, appearing very casual. It was a kind of soaring confidence. Obviously, he came from a wealthy family, or he himself was strong enough. This young master heard that the 8 great treasures here are very famous. "Give this young master a portion," he said. "All right." The waiter immediately turned and went to the kitchen. In a short while the dishes were served. That young man only took a bite, and his eyes widened, revealing an expression of disbelief. "It's delicious. It's delicious. It's delicious. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful," he praised. To be honest, this culinary skill is only average, but the ingredients themselves are too fresh and delicious. One bite makes one unable to stop. Extremely wonderful. Hungry. Hunyo tugged on the corner of Ling Han's clothes. It was fine before, but when someone ate and drank to his heart's content in front of her, she instantly couldn't stand it anymore. Ling Han nodded, and had the kitchen prepare lunch for them. He Hunyo Lu Yutong Zhu Wujiao Qinyi and Guang Yuan sat at a table. When the good dishes were served, they immediately started eating. The food they ate was obviously not comparable to what they sold to others. They used not only the meat of demonic beasts, but also many precious medicinal ingredients, which were made into medicinal cuisine. These medicinal ingredients had been planted in the Black Tower for at least a month or 2, so they were at least 100 years old. What kind of concept was that? It could be said that only in Ling Han's last life, he would have had so much wealth for him to squander like this, but he was only in the spiritual ocean tier now, and was also in the North region, a relatively barren land, so even a force like the Winter Moon sect couldn't do it. With delicious food in front of them, everyone began to fight over food without any regard for their image. Of course, none of them could possibly win against Hunyo. The little girl was born to be a foodie. Just as they were enjoying the food, they saw the young man in embroidered clothes walk over and say with a drooling face, "Can I sit down and eat with you? I won't eat for free. This meal is on me." Ling Han smiled and said, "Those 8 dishes aren't enough for you." The embroidered clothed youth rubbed his nose and said, "It really isn't enough. Moreover, the dishes on your table seem to be even more delicious." His eyes were shining and he was about to drool. Indeed, with different ingredients the fragrance wafting out would be different. "Can't you see that all the waiters are desperately swallowing their saliva?" Ling Han looked at the young man in embroidered clothes and found him interesting. He smiled and said, "If you still have an appetite, please sit." The young man in embroidered clothes was overjoyed and hurriedly sat down, pulling out a pair of chopsticks and eating. He finally came out. If he wanted to eat, he had to fight for it. No one would be polite with him. Great. He ate a mouthful of meat, and his face instantly turned into a flower. This is a 2nd-tier demonic beast. Captivating fragrance deer, right? No, I've eaten many captivating fragrance deer, but the taste was definitely not this delicious. Moreover, there are many precious herbs inside. and eating one mouthful made all the pores on my body open up, and my cultivation increased slightly. He couldn't help but complain and said, "Waiter, with such good stuff, why didn't you give it to me? Do you think I can't afford origin crystals?" Ling Han laughed and said, "These are not supplied to outsiders." The eyes of the young man in embroidered clothes immediately lit up, and he said, "You're the owner of this restaurant?" "That's right." Ling Han nodded. "You provide me with these kinds of ingredients every day, and I'll let you name the price." The young man in embroidered clothes hurriedly said. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I've already said that these are not supplied to outsiders, and are reserved for my own family." The eyes of the young man in embroidered clothes shifted, and he said, "I'm called Gong Letian. How should I address you, brother?" If these words were heard by the people in the circle of youths, they would definitely cry out in disbelief because this guy's background was astonishing, and he had always been arrogant. Even in the extreme Yang city, there weren't many people that he took seriously, and now he actually called someone brother so warmly. It was truly inconceivable. But it also showed that this guy was really a glutton. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Ling Han, Brother Ling, from today onwards, you're my brother." Gong Letian was incomparably warm. "Since we're brothers, then those ingredients." He looked at Ling Han anxiously like a puppy. "Humph." A cold snort was heard, and a young man walked in from the door. His face was dark and ugly, and he was extremely ugly. "How dare you treat this young master's subordinate like this?" It was Lang Jun Kai. Lu Yutong immediately stood up and said, "You're not welcome here, scram." What a joke, in the extreme Yang city. Who has the right to tell this young master to scram? Lang Jun Kai sneered, and there was anger on his face. Something that was originally in the bag had actually encountered a setback. He was originally teasing a newly arrived pillar of the Tingyu Pavilion as usual, when he suddenly heard a servant report that the people he had sent out in the morning had all been captured, and were being hung up as a public display. This made him so angry that he was seething with anger, and he could not care less that he had not eaten that alluring little thing, and immediately rushed over. "Th Lang Jun Kai, when did you become so impressive?" Gong Letian suddenly spoke. Previously, he still had the appearance of a pitiful puppy, but the moment he turned around, he carried an overbearing arrogance. "Does this young master also not have the right to tell you to scram?" "Gong, young master Gong." Lang Jun Kai instantly choked up, revealing a hint of panic. The Lang clan was considered a reputable clan in the extreme Yang city, but their true confidence came from the earth-grade alchemists they attached themselves to. However, the Gong clan itself was an alchemy clan. Aside from Gong Letian, the rest of the 3 generations were all alchemists, and Gong Hiken of the older generation was even a low-level earth-grade alchemist. Compared to the Gong clan, the Lang clan was obviously greatly inferior, and there was absolutely no comparison. For these spoilt young masters, what they competed on was obviously their clan's background. Even if Lang Jun Kai and Gong Letian both had the cultivation of the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, Lang Jun Kai had no confidence to speak of in front of Gong Letian. "Don't affect this young master's mood to eat scram," Gong Letian said domineeringly. Chapter 378. Lang Jun Kai's face immediately showed shame and anger. He was a reputable young master, but someone actually pointed at his nose and told him to scram. How could he bear this? However, was he more important than Gong Letian? "Young Master Gong, this matter has nothing to do with you. Please don't interfere for young Master Lu's sake." He decided to persist. The young Master Lu he spoke of was the grandson of the alchemist Lang family attached to. He was also a descendant of a low-level earth-grade alchemist, and had the same status as Gong Letian. The Lang family was a vassal of the Lu family, and he, Lang Jun Kai, was naturally the younger brother of the Lu family's young master. Even if Lu Qiyuan stood in front of me, this young master would still tell him to scram. "Who do you think you are?" Gong Letian said disdainfully. He waved his hand again and said, "If you don't scram now, it won't be so easy to talk about what happens next." Lang Jun Kai was unwilling. His fists were clenched tightly, but he finally decided to concede and said, "Fine, I'll leave. Please release those people outside." Gong Letian couldn't help but walk towards Ling Han, and didn't make a decision on his own. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Although Gong Letian was also a second generation, He knew how to conduct himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to ask for Ling Han's opinion, and would just give the order directly. He smiled faintly and said, "You want to take people away? Sure, sell them for 100 origin crystals each." "You?" Lang Junkai was furious. 100 origin crystals each, why don't you go rob someone? Pay up or not? Ling Han didn't pay any attention and continued to eat. Gong Letian couldn't help but laugh. His gaze swept over Ling Han, and he really took Ling Han seriously. He always hated people without a backbone, and there were too many people around him who sucked up to him. Thus, he naturally admired Ling Han very much. The veins on Lang Junkai's forehead bulged. He sent out more than 40 people this time, and if he paid the ransom money one by one, it would be more than 4,000 origin crystals. It wasn't that he couldn't afford it, but it would make his heart ache. Too much. He shook his head. That's a lot. Ling Han counted on his fingers. A person can refine 10 or so crystals in a year. It'll only take 10 years. Lang Junkai almost jumped up. There were only 7 martial artists of spiritual ocean tier here, and the others were all in gushing spring tier, so how were they going to concoct origin crystals? Don't try to haggle. If you're going to take him away, then leave behind the yuan crystals. Otherwise, scram. Ling Han flicked his hand. Lang Junkai's eyes were spitting fire. But he only thought that Ling Han was so courageous because he had Gong Letian backing him up. Sadly, he really couldn't afford to offend Gong Letian. Lang Junkai's face alternated between green and white. Finally, he waved his hand and scattered origin crystals all over the table, saying, "Release him immediately." "Undo it yourself," Ling Han said. Lang Junkai almost blew up again. He glared at Ling Han fiercely for a while before he turned around and went out to put his subordinates down. He swore it wouldn't be over so easily. He certainly couldn't win against Gong Letian, but there was still young Master Lu. Ha 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 ha. Gong Letian laughed loudly, raised his wine cup towards Ling Han, and said with a smile, "Brother Ling, come, let me toast you. I'm definitely going to befriend you." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I'll have to think about it." Gong Letian pretended to be displeased, punched Ling Han's chest and said, "You're too much of these ingredients." As he spoke, his foodie instincts burned fiercely again. Hunyo instantly became stingy, placing her 2 small hands on the table protectively, and said, "They're all Nyos." Everyone laughed loudly. After the human skewers were unwrapped, other customers came to the restaurant one after another. However, each of the 8 dishes cost 1 origin crystal. Everyone indeed came for this, but most people would only order 1 dish to satisfy their cravings. After all, there weren't many rich people like Gong Letian. Even so, the restaurant's income was extremely impressive, reaching 500 to 600 origin crystals every day. Otherwise, it wouldn't have attracted the covetous eyes of young Master Lang Jun. As a foodie, Gong Letian was very persistent, and kept pestering Ling Han, insisting that he agreed to deliver the ingredients. However, there were indeed not many beasts in the Black Tower, and Ling Han wouldn't be soft-hearted just because someone begged him, so he naturally left him hanging. Thus, Gong Letian would come every few days, constantly bombarding Ling Han's ears, and unceremoniously eat with them. His skin was so thick that it made one's hair stand on end. "Come, come, come. Today, I'll bring you to broaden your horizons." On the 4th day, Gong Letian seemed to have found his conscience, and actually ran over before mealtime, pulling Ling Han along as he ran. "Broaden what?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "You'll know when we get there," Gong Letian said mysteriously. The extreme Yang city was very large, and they naturally couldn't use their movement techniques in the city. Thus, after about an hour or so, they finally arrived at a small lake. The willows hung upside down, and the pavilions and terraces were cut into a painting. The scenery was quite beautiful. Gong Letian brought Ling Han to a side courtyard by the lake. There were 2 old servants standing at the door, and when Gong Letian came over, they immediately bowed in greeting, and said, "Young Master Gong is here." Gong Letian nodded and asked, "Has the banquet started?" "Still waiting for a few important guests, so it hasn't started yet," an old servant said. "That's good." Gong Letian breathed a sigh of relief, and beckoned for Ling Han to follow him into the side courtyard. The courtyard was very large, and there was a large garden inside. On the left was the lake, rippling with light, and the scenery was beautiful. On the grass by the lake, tables of banquets were already set up, and at this time there were quite a few people seated. What kind of gathering is this? Ling Han asked. Today, there are quite a few people on the prodigy roll of the North region who have come. Firstly, to broaden their horizons, and secondly, some people have just returned from the deep mountains and great rivers, bringing with them spirit herbs or ancient items that have great exchange value, Gong Letian said. Ling Han nodded. Then this kind of gathering was worth attending. Perhaps he could even find out some information about the remaining 2 main ingredients. He said, "What's the prodigy roll of the North region? Huh, you actually don't even know this?" Gong Lishan's face was full of surprise. Just which corner of the world did you run out from? The prodigy roll of the North region records all the young experts in the North region below the age of 30. In total, only 100 people can make the roll. Ling Han gave an "oh" and said, "This is really the first time I've heard of it. Tell me, which geniuses are they?" "Here, take it." Gong Letian flipped his hand, and a book appeared out of thin air. A spatial ring. The Extreme Yang City was indeed the Extreme Yang City. Even this kind of spoiled brat was worthy of wearing a spatial ring. Ling Han took the book and glanced at it. On the cover, the words, "Prodigy Roll of the North Region" were written. The decorations of the entire book were also quite exquisite, with golden edges and golden lettering. It was as gorgeous as it could be. He opened it, and on the first page was written, "Compiled by the Spirit Treasures Pavilion." Great, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion really had a wide range of control. "This book is worth 1 origin crystal," Gong Letian said at the side. "So dark. More refreshing to read on the phone." Chapter 379. Ling Han was fearless and didn't argue because when it came to things like treasures, many people would rather believe it existed. Moreover, when a person was about to die, his words were kind, and Yan Tianzhao's words were still extremely destructive. His gaze swept over, and when it landed on Wen Yijian, he immediately waved and said, "Junior brother Wen." Pooh, quite a few people spurted out. Why did Ling Han call Wen Yijian junior brother? The two of them seemed to be completely unrelated, right? Wen Yijian was also slightly startled, and said, "I wonder why Master Ling calls me junior brother? You and I both received the inheritance of the 12 palaces, so of course we're senior brothers." Ling Han laughed loudly. No matter what, he had to drag Wen Yijian down and share some of his firepower. He obviously wasn't afraid of these flower blossom tier warriors now, but it would be difficult if some spiritual infant tier warriors came. Moreover, once the news spread, there might be shattering void tier elites from the middle state that crossed regions to come regardless of the cost. Then, even if he had the Black Tower's protection, could he be a coward for the rest of his life? Wen Yijian was from the East region, and came to the North region to pick up some benefits, so he obviously had to share some of Ling Han's burden. He couldn't bear all the blame, right? Master Ling really likes to joke. Wen Yijian laughed loudly, looking as if it was beneath him to argue, but in his heart, even if we're senior brothers, I'm still the senior brother. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "Junior brother Wen received the inheritance of the Scorpio Palace. Dare to make a heart oath and bet that I'm wrong?" A heart oath was an oath made against the heart of martial arts. If it was fake, one wouldn't be struck by lightning, but it would severely affect the martial artist's cultivation advancement, so it couldn't be made recklessly. Wen Yijian's eyes had a hint of anger, but his face was extremely calm as he said indifferently, "Why should I make a heart oath? Senseless." Ling Han didn't say anything else, but swept his gaze over everyone, and said, "Junior brother Wen and I are both kings of martial arts, and we've both broken through to the flower blossom tier. On top of this flower blossom tier king tier puppet, he summoned the rock spirit. Come and fight. How many people's blood will splatter in the sky and leave their lives here?" The corner of Wen Tianjian's mouth twitched. Why did Ling Han represent him again? Did this person have no ears at all? Didn't he hear what he said? He was even more shocked. He obtained enormous benefits in the Scorpio Palace, and he finally broke through to the flower blossom tier, but at the same time, he obtained a secret art that could hide his cultivation. He still appeared to be in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, so how did Ling Han see through him with a glance? What kind of fucking secret art was this? Don't care so much, take both of them down. The Flower Blossom tier elites all exchanged their opinions. Whether it was the inheritance of the 12 palaces or the divine treasure trove, they were both of great importance. They'd rather kill wrongly than miss out. I won't play with you North Region's lunatics anymore. When Yi Jian suddenly leapt up, Hong, the presence of the Flower Blossom tier spread out without reservation, and with a step, a divine ray bloomed, tearing through the air. Want to leave? Immediately, over a dozen attacks shot over. Even if when Yi Jian's battle prowess was impressive, he just broken through after all, so how could he withstand so many attacks? He was forced to descend. Junior brother one, let's fight side by side. Ling Han laughed loudly. When Yi Jian's nose almost crooked in anger. He could have left quietly and made a fortune in silence, but Ling Han actually exposed him. Now that he was in danger, it made him extremely gloomy. Ling Han, how did I offend you? Why are you messing with me like this? He said coldly, not even calling him Master Ling. Ling Han smiled, and said seriously, Junior brother one, we're one family, so we obviously have to cross the river together at this time. Don't worry, I'll protect you. Protect your sister, I could have just swaggered away. When Yi Jian gritted his teeth, but the situation before him obviously wouldn't go his way. Thankfully, those spiritual infant tier cultivators from before had already returned. Otherwise, if those elites had made a move, he could only wait to be captured. Now, he could stake it all and fight his way out of the encirclement. Ling Han, I'll definitely settle this score with you. As he swore, he stood together with Ling Han. The two of them, together with the rock spirit, formed a corner back to back. Ha, that's a matter for the future, Ling Han said indifferently. Lu Yutong and the others tactfully didn't step forward. If they went up now, not only would they not be able to help Ling Han, they'd instead become a burden, which made them feel uncomfortable. Even though their growth speed was very fast, and they even fought their way into the North Region's prodigy role, they still couldn't help Ling Han out of trouble. Come, whoever wants the secret treasure, make your move, Ling Han said with a loud laugh. However, you guys should think clearly. I'm still a heaven-grade alchemist, and if you harm a single hair of mine, be careful that the entire alchemist society won't let you go. The Flower Blossom tier elite's faces twisted, feeling that Ling Han was both courageous and a bit of a scoundrel. Fighting one against many, this was naturally courageous. But he brought out his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist to threaten them, making it hard for them to avoid having their hands and feet bound when they made their move. Wasn't that extremely shameless? This was not the slightest bit like an 18-year-old young man. He was mature and sly, practically an old fox. Capture him, try not to hurt him. The Flower Blossom tier elites reached a consensus. A heaven-grade alchemist's weight was really too heavy. It was fine to kill him in secret, but if they killed Ling Han in public, it would definitely spread throughout the world. At that time, whoever succeeded in killing Ling Han would definitely be pushed out by the sect as a scapegoat to appease the fury of the alchemists in the world. Oh, I didn't get the secret treasure, but I have to be the one to die. Who would do such a thing? Thus, everyone hoped that the others would accidentally kill Ling Han. They would definitely not do such a thing themselves. Go! Over 20 Flower Blossom tier elites attacked together, and the momentum was very vast. Ling Han, Wen Yijian, and the rock spirit all roared loudly, brandishing their swords and pulling out their fists, all charging forward. Hunyo stomped her feet in anger on the side, but it was a chaotic battle now. Any gust of wind was on the level of the Flower Blossom tier, and it filled the entire battlefield. No matter how fast she was, she couldn't possibly avoid so many aftershocks of the attacks, and if she fought head-on, she would only be injured. Her battle instincts were too terrifying, and she immediately calculated this conclusion, so she didn't rush forward in a hot-headed manner. Nyo wants to become strong. Nyo wants to become strong. The little girl shouted loudly. Hong, something seemed to have awakened inside her body, emitting a faint divine might. Mortals couldn't feel it at all, but it soared straight to the 9 heavens, even breaking through this world. Ling Han now had power as high as the 8th layer of the Flower Blossom tier, and added with the divine sense of the former heaven tier, he could actually still use the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. However, the amount was relatively small, so his actual tier was equivalent to the 3rd layer of the Flower Blossom tier. However, added with the various secret arts he grasped, his battle prowess soared to 10 stars. 7 stars. This was mainly because his power was forcefully poured in. Otherwise, if he truly advanced into the Flower Blossom tier, then even if he was in the first layer of the Flower Blossom tier, his battle prowess could reach 10 stars. But now it was enough. Because 9 of his opponents had just broken through in the Mystery Realm, such as Yukuan Luan by He Shun, and other veteran members of the Prodigy role. How many stars of battle prowess could they have after just breaking through? Additionally, even older members of the Prodigy role like Aofeng had also broken through not too long ago. It was only a matter of 1 or 2 years or at most 10 years, but how many layers of the Flower Blossom tier could they reach in 10 years? When he battled the Golden Blood Demonic Ape, weren't there also more than 20 Flower Blossom tier cultivators? And there were even those in the 9th layer of the Flower Blossom tier, but weren't they still smashed into pieces? Chapter 380. Zhu Xian'er, female, 21 years old, 2nd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal tier, from the Half Moon sect. 2 years ago, she ranked 76th in the Prodigy tournament. However, a year later she broke through to the Spiritual Pedestal tier, and this year she even advanced to the 2nd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal tier. It's conceivable that at the end of next year's Prodigy gathering, her strength will improve further, possibly reaching the 3rd layer or even the 4th layer. Estimated battle prowess is 12 stars, currently ranked 13th in the North region. Ling Han stopped and nodded. Zhu Xian'er lived up to her reputation as a genius. The speed at which her cultivation advanced was a little shocking. In other words, she broke through to the Spiritual Pedestal tier at the age of 20, and after entering the Spiritual Pedestal tier, she could still advance 2 steps in a year, which was quite shocking. Continuing to flip, Zuyuda ranked 19th, and the triplets of the Limitless sect ranked 67th, 68th and 69th, but the evaluation said that because the 3 were 1 if they joined forces, their battle prowess could reach 33rd. 2 of the 7 sons of Ao family also made the list, namely Ao Xinglai, ranked 78th, and Ao Yuanwei, ranked 89th. According to this ranking, he should only be ranked around 40th. However, there were still 4 months until the end of the year, and with Ling Han's speed of improvement, he could at least reach the 8th layer of the Spiritual Ocean tier when the Prodigy gathering started, and his ranking would naturally be far above 40. Moreover, this was the most normal speed. If he could obtain additional worldly treasures, then it might not be certain. The 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean tier and the Spiritual Pedestal tier weren't impossible. Forget it, do I still have to join in the fun for this kind of child's play? There's no benefit. Ling Han shook his head. With his heaven tier status in his previous life, competing with these little guys was already very shameful. Moreover, the time was too short and he might not be able to get first place. That would truly be shameful. Many great beauties from the extreme Yang city came today, Gong Letian said. That's Zhang Luxian, the eldest miss of the Zhang family, and over there Di Tinglan, the 3rd miss of the Di family. The 7th miss of the Gong Sun family is also here, Gong Sun Lan Hui, as beautiful as an orchid, with a heart like an orchid. Ling Han followed his finger. Sure enough, whether it was Di Tinglan, Zhang Yuexian or Gong Sun Lan Hui, they were all extremely outstanding beauties. Even compared to Lu Yutong and Li Xichan, they were not inferior. Their stunning beauty, their outstanding talent in martial art, and their noble birth made them dazzling stars. Everyone chased after them. It could be seen that there were many young men circling around the 3 women, trying to attract their attention. It's a pity that their standards are too high. Otherwise, this young master could introduce you to them. Gong Letian nudged Ling Han's waist. Ling Han gave a ha, and said, "Thank you very much. That's true. Your family's Lu Yutong is also a great beauty, not inferior to any of them," Gong Letian said. Ling Han only smiled, thinking that Gong Letian had never seen a true beauty before. In his last life, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had been called the #1 beauty in the world, and was far superior to Lu Yutong and Zhang Luxian. Unfortunately, she was a bit too barbaric, or else he really could marry her. Ling Han hurriedly shivered. He actually thought of marrying a barbaric woman like the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? What was wrong with his brain? Zhong Ziwei is here, someone suddenly called out, immediately making most of the people stand up. Ling Han immediately ran through his mind. This was a person on the North region's Prodigy roll, ranked 54th at the 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean tier, But his battle prowess reached 18 stars and could surpass 9 stars to battle. This was very shocking. On the entire prodigy roll, only one person could surpass 10 stars to battle, Zhu Xian'er. The other prodigies could only surpass 9 stars. However, surpassing 9 stars in the spiritual pedestal tier and surpassing 9 stars in the spiritual ocean tier were completely different concepts. The higher the tier, the harder it was to surpass one's tier to battle. For example, the Zhong Ziwei could surpass 9 stars now, but after he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, he might fall to 8 stars or even 7 stars. Sword Emperor and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden could surpass 10 stars to battle in the heaven tier. They were truly geniuses among geniuses, exceptional freaks. From this point, Zhu Xian'er was indeed astonishingly talented. No wonder she was in the middle state sections. Zhong Ziwei. Gong Letian immediately revealed an excited expression. Ranked 54th on the prodigy roll, the hardest thing is that he doesn't come from a large sect, but from a small clan, yet he squeezed into the prodigy roll with his own efforts. He's my idol. Not long later, everyone clustered around a slender young man. Even Di Tinglan and Zhang Lixian surrounded him, all of their pretty faces blossoming with beautiful smiles, unstintingly displaying their stunning beauty. Zhong Ziwei, ranked 54th on the North Region's prodigy roll, could be said to be one of the North Region's most dazzling stars. As long as he didn't fall, he would definitely become a great figure in the North Region in the future. Such a person would definitely be noticed by everyone fighting to be on good terms with him. I'm so envious, Gong Letian said, his eyes burning. He also wanted to become a person that was the center of attention. Although he was a spoiled brat and who knew how many people flattered him, that was because of the clan behind him, not him. As a young man full of pride, he longed to use his own strength to obtain respect. Lu Qiyuan also went up and raised his wine cup to toast Zhong Ziwei. Due to Lu Qiyuan's background, Zhong Ziwei was very polite, and the two chatted happily. However, the distance was too far, and Ling Han couldn't hear what they were talking about. As the banquet continued, more and more people from the prodigy roll arrived. As the prodigy battle that was held once every 3 years was going to start in about 4 months, and the location was Extreme Yang City, many people had already arrived. Even quite a few experts from the prodigy roll had arrived. However, none of them were ranked higher than Zhong Ziwei, so there was not as much commotion as before. Coming so early was to avoid any delays on the road, and miss the grand event that happened once every 3 years. Secondly, with so many young experts gathered together, they could exchange spiritual medicines, treasures, and the like. Who knows, they might be of great use. This was the purpose of today's banquet. After the experts on the leaderboard finished talking about their recent adventures, the treasure exchange segment began. Everyone stood up and introduced their own treasures to everyone, as well as the types of treasures they wanted to exchange. This was a bit like an auction with all kinds of things like cultivation techniques, martial arts techniques, medicinal pills, and some things of unknown origin. They were all antiques that could be found in all kinds of ruins, and some things were even older than Ling Han's previous life. Some treasures were quite precious. Zhong Ziwei even took out a 600-year-old gold silk thousand spark fruit. This was a 4th-tier spirit fruit that could greatly increase the cultivation of the spiritual ocean tier. Because Zhong Ziwei already reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he only needed to solidify his tier, and didn't need to increase his cultivation, so he didn't need this spirit fruit. However, too many people didn't reach the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, so it triggered a fierce competition. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 381. Ling Han was also very interested. He was now at the 4th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, still far from the peak of the spiritual ocean tier, so the gold silk thousand spark fruit was especially suitable for him, enough to improve him by 1 or 2 small tiers. Then, at the end of the year, he could charge to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, or even the spiritual pedestal tier. After all, once his spiritual power cultivation was there, the barrier of a large tier didn't exist. Although Ling Han wasn't interested in competing with the younger generation for rankings, he was long past the competitive age, unless there was a treasure that moved him as a reward. However, as a person with high self-esteem, he still hoped to become the strongest. Even if there was a gap of several years between him and the top few on the prodigy roll, who asked him to have such a deep foundation. Since they could be compared together, then he didn't want to lose. Everyone took out what they thought was precious to exchange, but Zhong Ziwei shook his head and refused. It didn't match his expectations. Ling Han stood up and said with a smile, "Brother Zhong, I have a bottle of medicinal pills. I don't know if you're interested." Brother Zhong, everyone turned to look at Ling Han, all revealing a mocking expression. What a joke, a nameless junior at the 4th layer of the spiritual ocean tier actually dared to call an expert on the prodigy role brother. The ignorant were truly fearless. A prodigy like Zhong Ziwei didn't have the ability to charge to the spiritual pedestal tier. Wrong, he didn't break through not because he couldn't, but because he wanted to strengthen the spiritual ocean tier to an extremely sturdy level, so that he could charge to a higher tier in the future. Which young prodigy of this generation wasn't ambitious? Martial art was in a flourishing age, with elites emerging from all walks of life, constantly breaking the minimum age to break through to a certain tier, and the number of top elites was increasing. Which young man didn't want to squeeze into the peak of martial art and lead the way? A few bottles of medicinal pills. Would Zhong Ziwei lack medicinal pills? What kind of medicinal pills could a 4th layer spiritual ocean tier cultivator take out? It was said that some forces in the middle state extended an olive branch to him. Although it wasn't a super force like the Heaven Sword sect, it was definitely shocking. Hey, don't talk nonsense. Gong Letian hurriedly pulled on the corner of Ling Han's clothes, feeling that everyone's disdainful gazes also implicated him. Truly an undeserved calamity. Ling Han just smiled at him and did not explain anything. Unlike the others, Zhong Ziwei didn't put a mocking expression on his face. Instead, he said indifferently, "Little brother, what pill do you want to exchange with me?" Ling Han took out a bottle of Restore Spirit pill and threw it over. After Zhong Ziwei caught it, he opened the cork. When the smell of medicine wafted out, the careless expression on his face suddenly disappeared, and he exclaimed, "Restore Spirit pill." What? Spirit restoring pill? Everyone exclaimed in surprise, and their eyes burned with passion. For ordinary people, not only was the Restore Origin pill not a spiritual medicine, but it was also a hindrance because it could not increase one's cultivation. On the contrary, it would lower one's cultivation. Just like building a foundation, the effect of the Restore Spirit pill was to hammer the foundation to make it incomparably solid. However, there was no doubt that this would make the originally built foundation shorter, and it would take more effort to restore it to its original state. For ordinary people, they didn't need to strengthen their foundations. All they needed was the rapid improvement of their realms. However, for geniuses, they strived for perfection, striving to cultivate every tier to the point of perfection. They could be invincible in the same tier, and in the future they could also charge to the supreme tier. Otherwise, when they climbed to a certain height, the foundation would be unstable, and the tall building would instantly collapse. There were so many people at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier in the North region, but why were there only a few dozen people who squeezed into the prodigy list? It was because they solidified their tier shockingly, and their battle prowess far surpassed their tier. A person at the 1st layer of the spiritual ocean tier didn't need to take the trouble to solidify their foundation, so they might only be able to battle surpassing 2 stars. However, when they reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, geniuses would start to solidify their foundation and prepare for the future. Thus, their tier wouldn't change, but their battle prowess would skyrocket, and it wouldn't be strange to be able to battle surpassing 3 or even 4 stars. Thus, there were so many people at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier on the prodigy roll, but their battle prowess was extremely lacking. Zhong Ziwei had already reached the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier half a year ago. In this half a year, he had been suppressing his cultivation and solidifying his foundation, striving to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier in a perfect manner and possess battle prowess surpassing 2 or even 3 stars in one go. If he had Restore Origin pill and for months' time, it would be enough for him to solidify his tier perfectly. Then, with his talent, breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier wouldn't be the slightest problem. He had the ability to break through long ago but had been suppressing it. At that time, he would be able to soar into the sky, squeezing into the top 30 or 20 was even possible. He hurriedly looked carefully, and when he discovered that there were actually 20 Restore Origin pills in the bottle, he was instantly overjoyed. Even the hand that held the bottle trembled slightly. It wasn't that he hadn't seen and eaten Restore Origin pills before, but he immediately discovered that not only was it genuine, but the quality was also very high. But to what extent? He wasn't an alchemist, so he couldn't be sure. I'll trade. Zhong Ziwei made a prompt decision. For a genius like him, decisiveness was definitely an inherent trait. An indecisive person definitely wouldn't reach this step. Ling Han raised his eyebrows and smiled. He knew that for a young genius like Zhong Ziwei, medicinal pills like Restore Origin pills were most precious. Unfortunately, yellow dragon fruits were hard to come by, and the stock in his hands was almost used up. Fortunately, after obtaining this gold silk thousand spark fruit, he didn't have any great pursuits in the spiritual ocean tier. When he reached the spiritual pedestal tier, the Restore Origin pill couldn't be exchanged for the worldly treasures he needed, so it had almost no effect. Zhong Ziwei also threw the gold silk thousand spark fruit over, which was stored into the Black Tower by Ling Han. The two were all smiles, acting as if nothing had happened, showing their extremely strong control. If it were an ordinary person, they'd definitely be in a hurry to leave after obtaining the treasure. Fairy Zhu is here. Fairy Zhu is here. At first, there was only a small commotion, but it immediately caused a commotion in the audience. Even Gong Letian stood up at once and said, "Where is Fairy Zhu? Where is Fairy Zhu? Fairy Zhu Zhuxian heir?" Ling Han was slightly surprised. Was this woman's charm really that great? He noticed that even Zhong Ziwei completely lost control, his face filled with a fanatical expression. There wasn't a trace of the appearance of a genius expert, and he wasn't the slightest bit different from others. Being able to make Zhong Ziwei, who had extremely strong self-control, fall so deeply, Zhu Xian'er's charm was evident. At this time, even Ling Han was a bit curious. What kind of beauty was this Zhu Xian'er to be able to bewitch all the people of the North region? And even the geniuses of the Middle States Heaven Sword sect were moved. The audience was in an uproar, and everyone rushed out to welcome this Fairy Zhu. 10 minutes later, a white-clothed woman walked out from the crowd. Her face was covered with a white veil, and her appearance couldn't be seen at all, but her graceful beauty made people feel relaxed and happy. Chapter 382. This white-clothed woman was like a fairy, graceful with every step, dignified and quiet, but her figure was really too moving. Her thighs were slender, enough to reach the waist of an expert of the same height. The longer a woman's legs were, the more attractive her figure was, and on her body it was practically perfect, which was why just the way she walked made people have endless fantasies. Her willowy waist was slender, but her buttocks were raised high, revealing a shocking curve and emitting a sexy charm. She wasn't very great, looking like she could be grasped with one hand. Her neck was like jade, noble like a swan, and her black hair was like a waterfall, tied with a snow-white ribbon. She didn't have a single ornament on her body, but it made people feel that this was the most perfect, because any ornament on her body would only make her look tacky. Ling Han was surprised. As expected, this woman didn't need to reveal a trace of her appearance to make people feel that she was as beautiful as a fairy, stunning in both ancient and modern times. The only other woman he had felt this way was the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, he'd seen Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's appearance, and she certainly matched that perfect figure. In terms of appearance alone, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was indeed the most beautiful in the world, even so beautiful that she shouldn't appear in the mortal world. However, Ling Han sighed. Why was this woman so violent, running to his place from time to time and randomly taking things? When he tried to reason with her, he'd be threatened with a gaze, and his 4 disciples were beaten up by her in turns. In terms of reverence, Ling Han could pat his chest and say that his 4 disciples definitely listened to Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden more. Your mouth says no, but your eyes are quite honest. You know that Fairy Zhu is peerless in her generation, right? Gong Lishan's voice sounded in Ling Han's ears, rousing him from his memories. Ling Han only smiled and didn't make any excuses. In his mind, he was still thinking that if his strength surpassed Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, then marrying such a wife wouldn't be bad. It was pleasing to the eyes. However, strength was a guarantee, or else he'd be suppressed by her, and maybe at night, he'd be the one lying on the bottom. Once Zhu Xian'er arrived, she immediately became the center of attention. She was like a natural goddess, and anyone would pale in comparison before her. Moreover, her elegant demeanor was too alluring, causing others to be unable to even feel jealous of her. Be it men or women, they all looked at her with fanatical eyes, as if they were willing to go through fire and water for her as long as she gave the order. Ling Han was secretly astonished. This was too crazy, wasn't it? He would definitely not do such a thing. To be able to see so many young heavens chosen today, Xian'er is very happy. A toast to everyone. Zhu Xian'er raised her wine cup, and instantly, everyone looked overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, hurriedly raising their wine cups as well. As Zhu Xian'er lifted up a corner of her white veil, revealing her snow-white chin and dark red lips, everyone seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Some people even spat out blood from their noses, and some people were so excited that they fainted. Everyone drained the wine in their cups in one gulp, feeling that to be offered a toast by Zhu Xian'er, even if they died in this life, it would be completely worth it. Ling Han's heart rippled slightly. Although Zhu Xian'er's face wasn't completely revealed, just her chin, her small mouth, and that absolutely beautiful proportion made people draw out a picture of a beauty in their minds. With just a corner, Ling Han could be sure that Zhu Xian'er's beauty was far above that of Lu Yutong and the other girls, and even qualified to compete with Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, to move Ling Han's heart, this was something impossible. It couldn't be helped. Who asked him to see Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden every few days in his last life, and she did things that made him extremely depressed, making him unable to like her even if he wanted to. With such a precaution, so what if Zhu Xian'er was the second Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? Zhu Xian'er offered a toast and put down the white veil, instantly making everyone feel a strong reluctance to part, feeling a sense of loss as if someone had cut out their most beloved thing. She opened her mouth and said, "Xian'er wants to purchase a medicinal ingredient from everyone. If you don't have it, then information about the whereabouts of the medicinal ingredient is also fine. Xian'er will reward you greatly." "Fairy Zhu, please speak." "Right, to be able to serve Fairy Zhu, that is our honor. Go through water and tread on fire, and die 10,000 deaths without hesitation." Everyone called out one after another, and even quite a few girls' faces were filled with fanaticism. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face didn't show any expression, and she said, "The material Xian'er wants is a 7th level medicinal herb called Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass." Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass. What is that? Never heard of it. Quite a few people immediately shook their heads, but Ling Han was startled, because Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass was one of the 2 main ingredients he needed. He didn't think he'd actually come into conflict with Zhu Xian'er. If the two competed, it could be imagined that countless people would definitely hate him. Who cared? So what if she was an absolute beauty? She couldn't even compare to a hair of his old man. "Fairy Zhu, I know where the Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass is." A youngster stood up very excitedly, and without needing to be urged, he already spilled it out. 3 months ago, I just came out of the Dark Demon Forest and heard someone mention the Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass. It should be in the depths of the Dark Demon Forest. Is. Everyone gasped. The Dark Demon Forest was one of the more famous danger zones in the North region. There were flower blossom tier beasts in the depths of the forest, and normally, no one dared to enter deep into it. "Fairy Zhu, the Dark Demon Forest is too dangerous. Why not wait 2 years? "Nonsense, Fairy Zhu needs the Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass to save someone. Can she afford to wait 2 years? Then you want Fairy Zhu to enter the depths of the Dark Demon Forest and risk her life? That's right, in another 2 years, maybe Fairy Zhu can advance into the Flower Blossom tier, and then there'll be no need to fear." Ling Han's heart palpitated with eagerness. There was actually Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass in the Dark Demon Forest, and he received orders to pick 7 stalks of Fiery Sun Grass. Originally, he had no intention to pay attention to it, but now there seemed to be a mysterious hand pushing him. Come, he had to go to the Dark Demon Forest. Zhu Xian'er was a bit worried at first. That person publicly revealed the whereabouts of the Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass, which might cause trouble. But thinking again, how many people dared to enter the Dark Demon Forest? She thanked that person and promised that if he encountered any trouble in the future, he could go to the Half Moon sect to find her. Because she was in a hurry to find the Crimson Red Chilling Ice Grass, she soon bid farewell and left. With her departure, the atmosphere instantly plummeted. Everyone had no mood, and many people also exchanged for the treasures they liked, so they bid farewell and left one after another. Ling Han was also very satisfied. On this trip, he not only obtained the gold silk thousand spark fruit, but also news of the crimson red chilling ice grass. Go back and refine the gold silk thousand spark fruit. Chapter 383. Ling Han. Many flower blossom tier warriors roared angrily. This youngster was too young, making it hard for them to feel reverence towards a heaven-grade alchemist. Ling Han cracked a smile, but acted as if he didn't hear. The massive golem was very gloomy. This stone pillar was truly unpalatable. It repeatedly turned its head towards Ling Han, hoping to obtain Master's permission to stop gnawing on these stones. Alright, if you want to see Yu Hongchang, I'll let you see her, Ao Feng said. He was a descendant of the spiritual infant tier, so his words were obviously more effective than normal flower blossom tier warriors. With a wave of his hand, someone immediately left. Ling Han frowned. Ao Feng's anger wasn't that intense, and there was even a hint of a proud smile in the depths of his eyes. Could it be that they already guessed his relationship with Yu Hongchang? This wasn't impossible. After all, a heaven-grade alchemist inexplicably asking for a person he'd never met before. Wasn't this worth pondering? Thinking again about their ages, and the Winter Moon sect just recruited a batch of disciples from the Rain Country, could it be that they couldn't find out some information about Ling Han? Were they deliberately putting on an act now just to test him? Ling Han sneered. He obviously didn't run over for a momentary conflict, but also had a trump card. Not long after, 2 spiritual pedestal tier warriors escorted a woman over. That woman was no more than 40 years old, and her face had a melancholy expression, yet it didn't hide her beauty. If one looked closely, she looked somewhat similar to Ling Han. This was definitely Yu Hongchang. Ling Han didn't even need to ask. There was a connection from their bloodline that made him certain that this was his birth mother. Grandmaster Ling, now that you've brought her here, do you have anything to say? Ao Feng asked calmly, as if everything was under his control. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and said, "Release her." Junior sister apprentice Hongchang, don't you think that this young man looks very familiar? Ao Feng asked Yu Hongchang. Ever since Yu Hongchang had arrived, her gaze had been fixed on Ling Han. There was disbelief and excitement in her expression, and even her body had begun to tremble. She ignored Ao Feng, and continued to stare at Ling Han as if it would never be enough. Grandmaster Ling, I heard that you were born in Rain Country, one of the 9 nations of the desolate north. You came from a small town under the rule of Diyuan City, and your father's name is Ling. What's your name again? Ao Feng had been snubbed, but did not take it to heart, and asked Ling Han again. When she heard this, Yu Hongchang's expression became even more excited. However, she immediately recovered her cold demeanor, and said, I don't know this young man, bring me back. Junior sister apprentice Hongchang, seeing the son that you have not seen for 18 years, you are still so cold? Ao Feng sneered. He had finally thrown out a heavy bomb. When they heard these words, the people of the Winter Moon sect were all in an uproar. So Ling Han's mother was actually a disciple of the Winter Moon sect. Furthermore, her identity was not ordinary at all. No wonder Ling Han would ask for a person for no reason. So there was a reason for this in the first place. I don't know what nonsense you are talking about. Yu Hongchang's expression was calm. Yet Ling Han revealed a smile and said, Mother, there is no need to hide it. Today, I am bringing you back to reunite with Father. Instantly the whole mountaintop was in an uproar. This speculation was one thing, but having it confirmed was another. A dignified heaven-grade alchemist actually had such a deep relationship with the Winter Moon sect. However, the relationship between the 2 parties was not harmonious at all. When she heard him call her mother, Yu Hongchang's tears instantly flowed out. She had forcefully resisted the urge to acknowledge her son. Wasn't it because she did not want to give others a handle to use against her, and allow the Winter Moon sect to use her to threaten her son? But she had never thought that her son would actually acknowledge her in public. She had not seen her biological son for 18 years, and now that she heard him call her mother, she completely lost control of her emotions and cried bitterly. If it were not for the fact that she was being held back by someone, she really wanted to pull Ling Han into her arms and kiss him to her heart's content. 18 years, a whole 18 years. Ha 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 ha. Ao Feng laughed loudly, but it was incomparably cold. He had never thought that the little evil creature that he had not killed in a moment of leniency had actually become a heaven-grade alchemist, someone that could stand on equal footing with the various great sect masters. Now, it was already very difficult to kill Ling Han, especially when Ling Han still had the inheritance of the 12 palaces on him, which was even related to a divine treasure trove. If the Winter Moon sect directly killed him and seized the treasure, he was sure that all the forces of the North region would attack the Winter Moon sect together in the name of taking revenge for a heaven-grade alchemist. However, there was no problem in keeping Ling Han in the Winter Moon sect. As long as Ling Han himself admitted that he was willing to stay here, who could meddle in other people's business? And it was also very easy to make Ling Han voluntarily stay, and that was Yu Hongchang. Using Yu Hongchang's life as a threat, there was no need to fear that Ling Han would not listen obediently. But no matter what, Aofeng could not feel happy. This little bastard was a stain on his life. The woman who should have become his wife gave birth to another man's son. Whenever it came to Ling Han, he would feel that he was cuckolded. Unfortunately, whether to kill Ling Han or not was no longer something he could decide. This was the decision of the Winter Moon sect's higher-ups, and it was the embodiment of the will of the 9 old monsters of the spiritual infant tier. Grandmaster Ling, since you've recognized your kin, you can stay in the sect from now on. Additionally, I will invite your father over so that your family can reunite, Aofeng said menacingly. Would he be so kind as to let the son of his enemy be killed in front of him? Not only that, he would also bring the man who had cuckolded him, and keep him hanging in front of him all day long. If it was used as a threat, one was enough. Killing the other would be enough, and it would be just nice to make an example out of him. Grandmaster Ling, since we've already shown such sincerity, shouldn't you also show some expression? Aofeng said with a smile. I heard that you've obtained a great many treasures in the 12 heaven mystery realms. Take them all out and let us have a look. Ling Han also smiled, but it was similarly very cold. Is there something wrong with your ears? I've already said that I'm here today to take someone away. If Grandmaster Ling wants to leave, please go ahead, another Flower Blossom tier elite said. His name was Li Peiyuan, and there was also a great elite of the spiritual infant tier in the Li clan. However, junior sister Hongchang is a member of our Winter Moon sect, so she will naturally stay in our sect. Ling Han looked at the dozen or so Flower Blossom tier elites in front of him, and said, what if I want to forcibly take someone away? Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed loudly, and Aofeng said, Grandmaster Ling, your attainments in alchemy are indeed unparalleled, but you are only in the spiritual pedestal tier, after all. Moreover, although you have alchemical pills that can increase your cultivation by a whole tier, our sect doesn't only have Flower Blossom tier elites. In reality, Ling Han had already used up the power boost from the Black Tower of the spiritual pedestal tier, so it was impossible for him to possess the battle prowess of the Flower Blossom tier now. However, he obviously wouldn't say this out loud. Fighting and killing, that's something only boorish men do, Ling Han said disdainfully. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a skeleton immediately appeared at the mountain gates. Hong! A terrifying aura swept out, and instantly, including Aofeng and the other Flower Blossom tier elites, they all fell limply onto the ground at the same time. The remains of a god, just like how a spiritual infant tier law decree could suppress a spiritual pedestal tier elite. Wouldn't the remains of a god be even more awesome? If it weren't for the fact that the divine essence in this god's skeleton had been sucked clean, with the vigor of a god's chi and blood, it was completely capable of instantly turning everyone into bloody froth. Chapter 384. I've heard of Master Ling's name for a long time. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation. This old man admires you. Lu Jitong immediately clasped his hands, appearing quite polite. Even though both of them were Earth-grade low-level alchemists, to be able to refine 13 stars bone-forming pill, Ling Han's alchemy ability was more than just Earth-grade low-level. He was probably limited by cultivation and couldn't increase the flame's extreme power, so he could only stop here. Such an alchemy genius would definitely become a grandmaster in the future. Master Ling. Li Feichun also clasped his hands in salute. Although his martial art level completely crushed Ling Han and Lu Jitong, the two's achievements in alchemy were shocking, enough to be on equal footing with him, and even had the upper hand. Who asked alchemists to have a transcendent status? Ling Han smiled and said, "Please do not divulge my affairs to anyone else." He didn't want to be targeted by the Thousand Corpse sect for the time being. This sect had resurrected in the dark for who knew how long, and its strength might be extremely terrifying. Definitely. Lu Jitong and Li Feichun both nodded, and didn't ask anything. Since Ling Han's identity was confirmed, and the quality of the bone-forming pill was recognized by Lu Jitong, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion naturally had no more doubts, and listed the 3 bone-forming pills as the highlight of the next auction. "Master Ling, can we sit together and discuss alchemy?" Lu Jitong asked. "Sure." Ling Han nodded. "I opened a restaurant, so let's go there." He revealed his identity with the intention of getting to know Lu Jitong. "Listen to Master Ling." Lu Jitong nodded quickly. For him, it didn't matter where he ate. The important thing was to be able to discuss alchemy with Ling Han. Ling Han could refine 13 stars bone-forming pill, and his alchemy skills naturally far surpassed him. If he didn't take the opportunity to ask for advice, then he'd really be an idiot. The two arrived at Forget Not. Ling Han had the kitchen prepare dishes and slaughtered a second-tier demonic beast. It was a bewitching fragrant deer that grew up eating 100-year ginseng. Even if it was cooked in clear water, the taste was delicious enough to make people's teeth drop. Sure enough, after Lu Jitong tasted a mouthful, he couldn't care less about his old face. He was so busy with his chopsticks that he couldn't stop eating, completely forgetting that he still had to consult Ling Han on the Tao of Alchemy. After knowing that Ling Han had come, Lu Yutong and the others also came over one after another. Ling Han introduced them one by one, and everyone sat down to eat together. Hunyou's big appetite naturally gave Lu Jitong a fright, and made the old man feel a sense of danger, afraid that he wouldn't be able to win against Hunyou. When he was half full, Lu Jitong remembered his business and hurriedly discussed pill refinement with Ling Han. Ling Han spoke casually, but every word of the Alchemy Emperor was a gem. Very quickly, Lu Jitong forgot his status, and couldn't help but stand up, standing solemnly at Ling Han's side. It was just like the time when he was still an alchemy apprentice, listening to the teachings of his respected master. In Lu Jitong's heart, Ling Han's status was already infinitely elevated, even surpassing the 5 Earth-grade high-level alchemists, and was just like a heaven-grade existence. He had heard the 5 of them expound on alchemy, but compared to Ling Han, none of them had as deep an understanding as Ling Han. The difference was almost like the difference between heaven and earth. Could this be the reincarnation of the Alchemy Emperor? Otherwise, how could a mere 17 years old have such a shocking understanding of alchemy? Needless to say, he really guessed correctly. Pung 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 pung, but at this moment a clamor came from downstairs, causing Ling Han to stop. Lu Jitong was listening attentively, as if a brand new door was slowly opening for him, allowing him to become an Earth-grade middle-level existence. Even if he was limited by his cultivation and temporarily couldn't refine Earth-grade middle-level medicinal pills, as long as he advanced into the flower blossom tier, everything would fall into place. Just like Ling Han with the heaven-tier martial art comprehension in his last life, he only needed to accumulate cultivation now, and once his cultivation was sufficient, he would naturally advance smoothly. He was instantly enraged, and his killing intent spread, wishing he could immediately tear the person who disturbed Master Ling's body into pieces. "I'll go," Zhu Wujiu immediately said, turning to leave the room. When Zhu Wujiu arrived downstairs, he saw 2 young men standing in the lobby. They had brought more than 10 subordinates with them, and they were chasing away the customers in the lobby. All of them looked like fiends, and the waiters didn't dare to step forward to stop them. Zhu Wujiu only recognized one of the 2 young men, Lang Junkai, but if Ling Han came out, he would recognize the other person as Lu Qiyuan, Lang Junkai's master. Lang Junkai obviously wasn't willing. He originally wanted to take Forget Not, which was equivalent to having a gold mountain, but he didn't expect that he didn't get the gold mountain, and instead was extorted by Ling Han for more than 4,000 origin crystals. He knew that Ling Han had Gong Lishan's support, and he couldn't resist, so he found Lu Qiyuan and instigated it. And Lu Qiyuan was tempted. Gold Mountain, who didn't want to take it? Lang Junkai was afraid of Gong Letian, but was he? Of course he wasn't. Then let's go. This time, he invited a spiritual pedestal tier consecrator from his family, and with such a big shot overseeing things, he wouldn't be afraid of not being able to force Ling Han to bow his head. Go, tell your boss to come out and greet young Master Lu, Lang Junkai said coldly. He was extremely displeased. This gold mountain should have been his, and that one should have been his. However, Lu Qiyuan made a move, so he obviously could only drink some soup. He definitely wouldn't have a share of the beauties, and being able to get 10% of the profits would already be enough to thank the heavens. Lu Qiyuan wasn't a generous person, and on this matter, Lang Junkai didn't make any effort. Zhu Wujiu walked downstairs and said, "You're not welcome here, get out." Haha, since when did a mere gushing spring tear dare to be so arrogant? Lang Junkai sneered. Let me tell you, no matter who comes today, it's useless because young Master Lu is here, he said confidently. In the entire extreme Yang city, the number of spoiled brats that could refute Lu Qiyuan's face could be counted on one's fingers, and Ling Han definitely wasn't one of them. Unless Gong Letian was willing to risk everything to protect Ling Han. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to stop Lu Qiyuan. After all, Gong Letian couldn't possibly stay and forget not forever, right? Zhu Wujiu, however, was amused. He knew Lu Jitong's identity. He was Lu Qiyuan's grandfather, the pillar of support for the Lu family. However, old man Lu was now standing quietly by Ling Han's side, obedient as if he was Ling Han's alchemy boy. The more Lu Qiyuan jumped around now, the more miserable he'd cry when the time came. He had no intention of reminding Lu Qiyuan, and leisurely said, "Young Master Lu, the extreme Yang city is full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It's better to be humble." What a joke. A mere gushing spring tear, nobody dares to lecture this young master. Take him down. Lu Qiyuan's gaze became stern, and a spiritual ocean tier martial artist immediately leaped out, grabbing towards Zhu Wujiu. This was naturally easy, and Zhu Wujiu immediately fell into the opponent's hands. Slap him, Lu Qiyuan said coldly. Pa 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 pa. That spiritual ocean tier martial artist immediately slapped Zhu Wujiu's face. Zhu Wujiu only gritted his teeth, but didn't beg for mercy, nor did he call for help. He had the intention to drag Lu Qiyuan into the water, because Lu Jitong definitely wouldn't punish him heavily for the previous disturbance. But if he was beaten miserably, would Lu Jitong have the nerve to punish him lightly? He always felt very guilty, not being able to share Ling Han's worries and difficulties. Thus, when encountering this kind of thing, he'd rather suffer a bit himself and drag Lu Qiyuan into the water. Chapter 385. A mere gushing spring tear warrior dares to be impudent in front of this young master. Humph, how will this young master deal with you? Lu Qiyuan was very angry. Previously, Ling Han was rude to him, and now Ling Han's subordinates also dared to be rude to him, which made him extremely furious. When did the young master of the Lu family lose so much face? Zhu Wujiu laughed loudly and said, "Lu Qiyuan, don't regret it." Regret? Haha. This stinking brat actually dares to threaten this young master. Lu Qiyuan laughed from extreme anger and walked towards Lang Junkai. Lang Junkai snorted coldly and said, "Master is arrogant, servant is also arrogant." Seemingly not knowing young Master Lu's identity, he looked towards Zhu Wujiu and said, "Listen, this young Master Lu's grandfather is an earth-grade alchemist, Grandmaster Lu. Brat, do you know what an earth-grade alchemist represents? He's even fiercer than flower blossom tier elites, and even spiritual infant tier elites have to be polite to him. Kneel down and call Ling Han a bastard 3 times, and this young master will spare you," Lu Qiyuan said with a smile. Coming here today was to slap Ling Han's face. Slap him until he obediently handed over the restaurant. Okay. Zhu Wujiu agreed readily. Lu Qiyuan and Lang Junkai were both stunned. How could he yield so quickly? Wasn't this brat very arrogant before? Could it be that he finally knew Lu Qiyuan's identity and was scared? Then let's begin, Lu Qiyuan said. Confusion was confusion. As long as he could slap Ling Han's face, it was enough. Being betrayed by his subordinates, it must be very unpleasant, right? Zhu Wujiu took a breath and was about to roar. Kneel down. Lang Junkai hurriedly said, about to rush up and knock Zhu Wujiu over. Forget it. Lu Qiyuan stopped him with his hand. Lu Qiyuan is a bastard. Lu Qiyuan is a bastard. Lu Qiyuan is a bastard. Zhu Wujiu roared loudly, his voice rolling and lingering. Fuck. Courting death. Lu Qiyuan and Lang Junkai glared at the same time, their faces full of anger. This brat actually dared to trick them. You're dead. Lang Junkai roared. Kill him for me. The followers hesitated. It didn't matter if they killed in self-defense. However, taking the initiative to kill someone was a different matter. The extreme Yang city had its own rules. Killing someone in public was a heavy crime, and no one would easily violate it. Thus, no matter how he beat Zhu Wujiu, he couldn't kill him in front of so many people. Take him back, Lu Qiyuan said coldly. If he killed him in the Lu family, who dared to come and ask for him? Even if they came, they only needed to say, I released him a long time ago, who knows where he went, and it would be over. Lang Junkai immediately understood. He gave a look to one of his subordinates and said, Arrest them. Who dares to attack? An angry voice rang out. It was extremely old. Which bastard is it this time? Lang Junkai asked impatiently. One after another. Was there no end to it? Grandpa, Lu Qiyuan said with a trembling voice, revealing an extremely nervous expression. Lang Junkai suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Grandfather Lu Qiyuan only had one grandfather, and that was the alchemy grandmaster Lu Jitong, an earth-grade low-level alchemist. He actually called him a bastard. Just for this he could be sentenced to death 100 times. Insulting an earth-grade alchemist. His legs immediately weakened, and he knelt down saying, I didn't intentionally insult Grandmaster. Please forgive me, Grandmaster Lu. Lu Jitong didn't even look at Lang Junkai. He only stared at his grandson, revealing an expression of disappointment and anger. He was listening to Ling Han teach alchemy, but was interrupted halfway. This made him furious, but he never would have thought that the troublemaker was actually his own grandson, making him feel extremely ashamed. This kindness of guidance could be said to be half a teacher. Yet his own grandson actually came to Ling Han to flaunt his prowess. This made him so ashamed that he wanted to die. He always thought that his grandson was very obedient, but only now did he know that it was just an act for him. Evil creature. He trembled all over, pointing at Lu Qiyuan. With a big stride he slapped Lu Qiyuan 4 times in a row. He used a lot of strength, causing both sides of Lu Qiyuan's cheeks to swell up. Lu Qiyuan also felt quite wronged, and said, Grandpa, why did you hit me? Hit you, I want to beat you to death. Lu Jitong said coldly, raising his right hand high again. Grandpa! Lu Qiyuan hurriedly threw himself at Lu Jitong's feet, tears and snot flowing out. He knew Lu Jitong's personality. Saying that he wanted to kill someone was definitely not a joke. I'm your only grandson, the Lu family's only son for 3 generations. If I die, the Lu family will end. Lang Junkai almost fainted. Even Lu Qiyuan was going to be beaten to death. Then what would happen to him? Lu Jitong raised his hand high, but ultimately couldn't slap down. This was indeed the only son of the Lu family. Jitong, forget it. Ling Han also walked down from upstairs. You. Lu Qiyuan wanted to climb up from the ground when he saw him. Lu Jitong immediately slapped him and scolded, You what you? Call me master. Ma master. Lu Qiyuan's eyeballs almost popped out. This was just a 17 or 18-year-old youth much younger than him, and he was actually some master. It was just that Lu Jitong gave him another slap in the face, causing him to shiver in fear. He wasn't an idiot. Didn't he realize something by now? Master. He hurriedly called out obediently. Ling Han didn't care, and instead said to Zhu Wujiu, who did it? Him and him. Zhu Wujiu immediately pointed at Lu Qiyuan and Lang Junkai. Ling Han nodded and said, Jitong, this grandson of yours is a bit arrogant. Lu Jitong nodded awkwardly, and immediately slapped Lu Qiyuan again. He didn't show any mercy, really beating him to death. Lu Qiyuan wanted to escape, but how could a spiritual ocean tier warrior be a match for a spiritual pedestal tier warrior? Naturally, he could only be beaten. Only when Lu Qiyuan was about to be beaten to death did Ling Han move to stop Lu Jitong, and said, The death penalty can be avoided. Thank you, master. Lu Jitong hurriedly said, his face full of joy. If Ling Han really bore a grudge with Ling Han's talent, He would definitely become a heaven-grade alchemist in the future, and the entire Lu family would suffer because of this. Now Ling Han obviously didn't plan to pursue the matter, which naturally made Lu Jitong relax. Lang Junkai's cold sweat fell like rain. Lu Qiyuan was beaten half to death. Then what about him? Ling Han's gaze looked over as if he was looking at a dead person. Young Master Ling, spare me once, spare me once. Lang Junkai said with a trembling voice. He now knew why Lu Yutong and Zhu Wujiu were so confident. It wasn't that they were country bumpkins blindly arrogant, but their trump cards were shockingly powerful. Master Ling, leave this boy to me. Lu Jitong said with a murderous expression. No matter what, he had to give Ling Han an explanation. Whether he was a grandson or not, he obviously couldn't bear to kill him, so he could only find another mastermind. Oh. Chapter 386. Don't think that Lu Jitong was a good person. On the contrary, being able to sit in his position, how could he possibly be a soft-hearted person? Not only had Lang Junkai been executed by him, even the Lang clan had accused the old man of a groundless crime. He had all the experts killed, and the remaining women, children, old and young were chased out of Extreme Yang City. He was truly vicious and merciless, almost wiping out the Lang clan. The old man certainly had a reason to be angry. Originally, Lu Qiyuan wouldn't have come into conflict with Ling Han at all, and it was completely instigated by Lang Junkai. If he hadn't been present that day, what would have happened to Lu Qiyuan? This was equivalent to killing his grandson, so the old man obviously wouldn't be polite when he acted. In just one day, the Lang clan completely disappeared from the Extreme Yang City, showing the shocking ability of an Earth-grade alchemist. Ling Han was also an Earth-grade alchemist, which meant that as long as he revealed his identity, he could obtain the same status and power as Lu Jitong. However, because of the potential threat of the Thousand Corpse sect, Ling Han didn't want to reveal his identity so quickly. Thus he took a detour and pulled Lu Jitong along. With an Earth-grade alchemist backing up the restaurant and medicine shop, he similarly didn't need to have any worries. Next, he was going to the Dark Demon Forest, and Lu Yutong and the others naturally had to help him take care of the two shops. Thus, with an Earth-grade alchemist supporting them, he was naturally at ease. Otherwise, why would he need to specially subdue Lu Jitong? Ling Han made some arrangements. He didn't plan on bringing anyone on this trip to the Dark Demon Forest, but after Hunyou found out, she immediately made a big fuss and insisted on following him. Thinking of the little girl's speed, Ling Han knew that he couldn't get rid of her, so he could only nod and agree. However, he hadn't set off yet when he received an invitation from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, asking him to attend a banquet. Ling Han thought it was about the bone-forming pills auction, which involved his profits, so he obviously didn't have anything to think about, and happily agreed to attend the banquet. Hunyou was a little mischievous, and insisted on following him, so they went to the banquet together. When they arrived at the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, he and Hunyou were led into an elegant courtyard. A square table was placed in the courtyard, and there were already two people sitting there. Both were women. One was dressed in white, and even her face was covered with a white veil. Her skin was like snow, and it was impossible to tell which part was white and which part was skin. Her hair was like clouds, and it was like a waterfall. Zhuxian Erling Han was slightly stunned. Had he guessed wrong? This banquet wasn't about the bone-forming pill. The other woman looked to be around 21 or 22 years old. She wore a long red dress and had a fiery figure. Her curves were astonishing, and her face was also extremely beautiful. Her fiery red lips were filled with a fiery charm. Seeing Ling Han walk over with Hunyou's small hand in his, the red-clothed girl immediately stood up, smiled and said, "Young Master Ling, please." Zhu Xianer also stood up but did not speak. She only bowed slightly at Ling Han. "Young Master Ling, my surname is Yin, and my name is Lan," the red-clothed beauty introduced herself. "This is Miss Zhu Xianer, Sister Zhu. This is Ling Han, Young Master Ling." However, he has an even more impressive identity, a low-level Earth-grade alchemist. And Zhu Xianer was truly shocked now. How old was Ling Han? Was he even 20? And which Earth-grade alchemists weren't old men or women in their 50s or 60s? Hunyou looked at Ling Han for a while, and instantly revealed an expression of protecting her food. She climbed onto Ling Han's neck and said, "Ling Han is Nyo's." She expressed her sovereignty towards Zhu Xian'er and completely ignored Yin Lan. Obviously, she thought that this girl would not threaten her. Zhu Xian'er had always been indifferent. Whether someone liked or disliked her, she wouldn't take it to heart. But a 5 or 6-year-old little girl actually challenged her with a face full of jealousy. This really made her feel a bit awkward. Ha ha ha. Yin Lan laughed exaggeratedly, like a flowering branch shaking, extremely flirtatious. She was naturally charming, and didn't need to act flirtatious. Each and every movement was full of temptation. After giving Ling Han a coquettish look, she said, "Sister Zhu, you've become someone's opponent." Zhu Xian'er looked at Hunyo a few more times, and her eyes revealed astonishment because she realized that she couldn't see through Hunyo at all. But thinking again, a 5 or 6-year-old little girl didn't even awaken her spirit base, so naturally she couldn't cultivate. It wasn't that she couldn't see through her, but Hunyo wasn't a martial artist at all. Thinking about it this way, she felt relieved. Ling Han sat down, and Hunyo knelt on his legs with a serious expression. She kept glancing at Zhu Xian'er provocatively. The little girl really saw Zhu Xian'er as an opponent. In front of Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan, she'd never been so serious. "Lady Yin, what business do you have with me?" Ling Han asked. "First taste the wine and eat the dishes, we'll talk as we talk," Yin Hong said with a smile. "Could it be that, with us two beauties accompanying you, Mr. Ling still feels bored?" Ling Han held the wine cup and only smiled faintly, unmoved by the other party's seductive charm. He said, "Who is Lady Yin in the Spirit Treasures Pavilion?" She actually sent him an invitation in the name of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. "My father, Yin Shang, is the head pavilion master of the North Region Spirit Treasures Pavilion," Yin Hong said casually. This was very shocking. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion and the Alchemist Society were both colossi of the vast lands. Even if it was only a branch in the North Region, the power they held was still shocking, not inferior to elites at the level of the Winter Moon sect master. Unexpectedly, Yin Shang's daughter was actually so young. When did the old man have a daughter? Yin Hong continued, "I want to ask a favor of Mr. Ling." Ling Han couldn't help but smile, and said, "Lady Yin is the young mistress of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion's North Region headquarters. What matter can't you do that you need my help with?" Yin Hong sighed faintly and said, "Our Spirit Treasures Pavilion gathers in the headquarters every 5 years to compete in alchemy, formations, and martial art. However, it is limited to those below 30 years old. The purpose is to choose some valuable talents to invest in, and also to give marks to the people in charge of the 4 great branches." Hearing her say this, Ling Han had already guessed a little, but he didn't respond and only listened quietly. "Our North Region's branch has been at the bottom for hundreds and thousands of years." Yin Hong frowned slightly, appearing very unhappy. "However, I don't think that our North Region really doesn't have any geniuses. So, I plan to ask Mr. Ling to be a guest of the North Region headquarters and fight on behalf of the headquarters. At the end of next year, you will follow me to the Middle State." To the Middle State? Ling Han's heart moved. He indeed had the idea of going to the Middle State, but he had to settle a few things first. Cure his father's spirit base, save his mother, and kill Ao Feng. Only then could he be at ease and go to the Middle State. After all, the secret that Zishuesian buried was also in the Middle State. He glanced at Zhu Xian'er and said, "I am the representative of alchemy, and Lady Zhu is the representative of martial art. Then what about the representatives of formations?" "That's me." Yin Hong patted her chest, instantly causing a shocking wave. Chapter 387. On the spiritual pedestal of the heavenly spirit sea, 5-colored divine flowers also bloomed. Although there was no wind, they swayed lightly, exuding an aura that transcended the mundane. Ling Han opened his eyes. He had finally returned to the flower blossom tier. This was an important juncture, and from a certain perspective, this represented the first step he had taken to return to the peak. "Young Master Han." Everyone was startled awake, and they all came over to greet him. "Han have you suffered?" Yu Hongchang, meanwhile, pulled on Ling Han's arm and looked him up and down. Previously, when she saw Ling Han's pained expression, she could not come over to ask, so she kept thinking about it. No, everything is going smoothly now, Ling Han said with a smile. Congratulations, young Master Han. Zhu Wujiao and Guang Yuan both lagged behind. They naturally did not dare to compete with these female soldiers. And they were also very emotional. How long had it been? And an 18-year-old youngster had shockingly become a super elite of the flower blossom tier. In the desolate north, he would be an absolutely invincible existence. Ling Han nodded and said, "Wait for me to deal with a few pieces of trash first, and we'll drink together tonight." After saying so, he stepped out of the black tower. Brat! Elder Tianju and the tanned old man charged over at the same time, and behind them were 4 corpse soldiers, exuding a faint golden luster. However, the 8 spiritual infant tier elites of the Winter Moon sect chose to sit on the sidelines and watch. Obviously, they were wary of the immortal's corpse in Ling Han's hands. If Ling Han didn't use it, they definitely wouldn't dare to go up, as that would be courting death. What a pity, he had originally wanted to trick more people. When Elder Tianju and the tanned old man pounced, Ling Han casually waved his hand, and a set of immortal's corpse was already unleashed by him. Presumably, this old man had been dead for who knew how many years, so he wouldn't mind being tormented like this again. Old man, in the future, I'll definitely give you a grand funeral, Ling Han said in his mind. Pa, the 2 great elders of the Thousand Corpse sect immediately fell to the ground. Under the suppression of the immortal's aura, they had no power to resist at all, but the 4 corpse soldiers were completely unaffected. They had no consciousness in the first place, so how could they possibly be suppressed by the immortal's aura? For golden armored corpses were existences in the spiritual infant tier. So how terrifying were they? Ling Han didn't use the power boost from the Black Tower at the first instant, but instead activated the Thunder Battle Armor. Instantly, a flash of lightning spread out, forming a barrier of lightning around his body. He too immediately retreated. He wasn't arrogant enough to face the 4 spiritual infant tier corpse soldiers head-on. One after another, memories recovered in his mind, and Ling Han's feet naturally began to move. Demon Fairy Step. This was a heaven-grade movement technique that could only be used after advancing into the Flower Blossom tier, and didn't belong to mortals. In his previous life, he had specialized in cultivating the Demon Fairy Step, and had always used it even when he was in the Heaven tier. A sense of familiarity that he hadn't felt for a long time welled up in his heart, and Ling Han couldn't help but feel a great sense of heroism. Under the bombardment of 4 great spiritual infant tier corpse soldiers, he moved freely. How agile was a high-level heaven-grade movement technique? The level of martial arts in the North region was low. Even the strongest forces like the Winter Moon sect and the Beast Emperor sect only had cultivation techniques that were only Earth-grade medium level, and martial arts techniques were the same at most Earth-grade high level. Could this compare to a heaven-grade martial arts technique? The greatest characteristic of corpse soldiers was their endurance to beatings. They didn't fear death or pain, but in battle, they only relied on the instincts they had when they were alive. If they could still use the same martial arts techniques as when they were alive, then it would be too unreasonable. How could such an attack possibly do anything to Ling Han, who had used the Demon Fairy Step? Could this be the inheritance that Brat obtained in the 12 palaces? It's truly shocking. Under the siege of 4 corpse soldiers, he could easily move about, and would only occasionally be swept by the overflowing power, but that battle armor on his body is enough to block it. Why does this battle armor look like the Thunder Battle Armor? It can't be, right? Isn't the Thunder Battle Armor unable to be revived? Moreover, it's not in the hands of a disciple of our sect, and it's called something Han. Han Lin. Hiss. The 8 spiritual infant tier elites of the Winter Moon sect all drew in a sharp breath at the same time. Wasn't Han Lin referring to Ling Han in reverse? Fuck, they were actually all deceived by Ling Han, and had a secret treasure stolen from the Winter Moon sect by this brat. The might of this thunder battle armor on Ling Han's body could even easily block the residual power of a spiritual infant tier elite. What kind of value was this? We must snatch it back. The 8 of them all said, their eyes burning with passion. Under the attacks of 4 corpse soldiers, that brat is unknowingly distancing himself from that terrifying corpse. That's great, we just have to wait until he's a bit further away, and then we'll seize the opportunity to make our move. Alright, this time we'll definitely kill him in one strike. The 8 of them were all observing, waiting for a chance. Ling Han seemed to be fighting excitedly, completely forgetting that there were still 8 spiritual infant tier elites lying in ambush for him. However, this was also within reason. Now, he was being attacked by 4 spiritual infant tier corpse soldiers, so where would he have the leisure to look left and right? He continuously retreated, getting further and further away from that god's corpse. Now, the Grand Elder of the Ao family and the others all shot out. Ling Han was now out of the range of influence of the god's corpse, so it was the best opportunity to make a move. Shoo, 5 people in front and 3 behind all charged over. I've been waiting for you all. Ling Han smirked coldly. He had the divine sense of the heaven tier, so how could he possibly overlook these 8 old things? This was precisely the tactic he had devised. In the first place, he had intentionally distanced himself from that god's corpse, which was why he was able to lure these 8 old guys out. When they heard these words, the hearts of the Grand Elder of the Ao family and the others trembled at the same time, and a bad feeling welled up within them. Without any reason, this was their instinctive reaction, and being able to reach the spiritual infant tier, they had the utmost trust in instinctive reactions. Thus, they immediately stopped in their tracks, and wanted to turn around and retreat. Too late. Ling Han raised his right hand, and another god's corpse was tossed out. Wang, a terrifying aura swept over. Pa. The 5 great spiritual infant tier elites that were charging at the front immediately fell to the ground, while the other 3 stumbled, but still escaped the range of influence of the god's aura. After all, they were far away, so they were not too greatly affected. Ling Han secretly sighed in pity. However, the Grand Elder of the Ao family and Shurhushuan were both among the 5 that fell to the ground, which made him very satisfied. These were the people he definitely had to kill. His feet moved, and the demon birth sword was already drawn, charging towards Shurhushuan in passing. You dare! In the distance, the 3 great spiritual infant tier elites stomped their feet anxiously. The Winter Moon sect only had a total of 9 spiritual infant tier elites, and if 5 of them died here, then their power would be reduced by half, and they would practically fall out of the ranks of the 4 strongest forces. Why wouldn't I dare? Ling Han said coldly. With a slash pew, Shurhushuan's head was sliced off by him, and instantly blood gushed out madly. A mighty spiritual infant tier elite, the strongest existence in the North region, actually died in such a cowardly manner. He didn't even have time to use any secret techniques, and was lying on the ground like a dead dog, waiting to be trampled upon. What difference was there between him and a nameless soldier? On Shurhushuan's head, his eyes were wide open, and he died with everlasting regret. Chapter 388. Pu Linghan instantly spat out a mouthful of wine. This woman's boldness was a bit unbearable. Feeling that only Gu Fenghua, this freak, could rival her. Seeing Yin Hong even say such words, Zhu Xian'er couldn't hide her curiosity. She picked up the small piece of meat on the table and slightly lifted the white veil, revealing her exquisite red lips. She opened her mouth slightly, revealing her snow-white teeth as if they were exquisitely carved, shockingly beautiful. She put the piece of meat in her mouth, then put down the white veil and chewed lightly. Instantly it made one feel endless regret, wanting to take another look. She wasn't as exaggerated as Yin Hong, but her eyes still revealed a shocked splendor. Such deliciousness was indeed a first in her life, giving her the urge to taste it again at all costs. However, she was Zhu Xian'er after all, and quickly suppressed this urge deep down, becoming indifferent again. Compared to enjoyment, she still had a great responsibility. Sister Zhu, why don't you marry young Master Ling? Yin Hong's words were unrelenting. Young Master Ling is only 17 and is already a low-level Earth-grade alchemist. With this speed, he can probably become a heaven-grade alchemist at 30. You can just find him to concoct pills. Moreover, following him and having such delicious food to eat, this life is worth it. She laughed mischievously and looked at Ling Han with some flattery, and said, Young Master Ling, I'll kidnap a wife for you. Can you give me more of this kind of meat jerky? These words instantly provoked 2 people, Zhu Xian'er and Hu Niu. Zhu Xian'er was fine. After all, she was an adult and could control herself, though her gaze was a bit cold. However, Hu Niu had a violent temper and immediately pounced out from Ling Han's embrace. Xiao, her small figure flashed and appeared in front of Yin Hong, waving a claw at her chest. Hiss! How could the two girls have expected that Hu Niu was actually an expert? She was very strange. Even if Ling Han had a sliver of heaven-tier divine sense, he couldn't see through her at all, let alone the two girls. A spiritual ocean-tier elite suddenly launched an attack, and Yin Hong wasn't on guard at all. With a ripping sound, the clothes on her chest were immediately torn apart, but immediately afterward, a white brilliance flickered and formed a light screen, forcibly blocking Hu Niu's small hand. Niu, stop! Ling Han hurriedly shouted. Only then did Hu Niu flip over and fall back into Ling Han's arms. She made a face at Yin Hong, still in a bad mood. The white light on Yin Hong's chest also dissipated. Because her clothes were torn, her snow-white skin could be faintly seen. However, what was shocking was that there were actually lines on her skin, as if they were tattoos. Formation pattern. Ling Han possessed the experience of a sky-human stage cultivator. His eyes immediately lit up and he turned to look at it. Formations were already lost and declined in his last life, and he could only come across them when exploring ancient ruins. However, Ling Han could only decipher them, and he could only set up early warning formations. However, in ancient times, formations were on par with martial art and alchemy. Once a formation master made a move, they could directly trap and kill dozens or even hundreds of martial artists of the same level. Their power was definitely top-notch. He was very interested in formations, but in his last life, he focused all his energy on alchemy and had no time to study formations. Secondly, there were no formation masters he could ask for guidance, and there were no formation manuals left from ancient times, so how could he learn? He never thought that he could actually meet a formation master now, as expected of the flourishing age of martial art. Not only were there freaks like Ronghuan Xian, Yan Tianzhao, Ma Duobao, and Hu Niu, but there were also long-vanished formation masters. Why are you staring so intently? Do you want me to take off my clothes for you to enjoy? Yin Hong said through gritted teeth. Although there was a smile at the corner of her mouth, it emitted a dangerous aura. Ling Han didn't withdraw his gaze. He wasn't interested in Yin Hong's body at all, only the formation patterns on her body. He'd seen quite a few formations in his last life, but it was the first time he'd seen the formation patterns carved on the body. Formations are indeed a good thing, Ling Han said. If you don't mind, take off your clothes and let me study them. Get lost. Yin Hong hurriedly covered her chest and fled into the house, obviously to change into new clothes. Zhu Xian'er looked at Hu Niu with great shock. She couldn't see through Hu Niu, thinking that she didn't cultivate at all. Who would have thought that she'd make such a huge mistake? Not only did she awaken her spirit base, but she was also in the spiritual ocean tier. 5 or 6 years old spiritual ocean tier, what kind of concept was that? In comparison, her cultivation wasn't even worth mentioning, the difference was too great. In the world of martial art, those below the flower blossom tier were all ants and mortals. Conversely, it could be said that the first 5 tiers were relatively simple, and even the youngest spiritual pedestal tier wasn't strange, but a 5 or 6 years old spiritual ocean tier. How could she not be shocked? Hu Niu's senses were amazing, and she immediately discovered Zhu Xian'er's gaze. She made a face at the latter, appearing very hostile. Ling Han smiled and said, Miss Zhu, what do you need crimson red chilling ice grass for? Zhu Xian'er was slightly surprised and said, so you were there that day? She paused, then continued, I need to concoct a heaven-grade medicinal pill, and crimson red chilling ice grass is one of the supplementary ingredients. Crimson red chilling ice grass could only be used as a supplementary ingredient? Who asked it to be a heaven-grade medicinal pill? Ling Han felt strange and said, I heard that your master went mad, but I think that earth-grade medium-level at most high-level medicinal pill should be able to cure it, no need for heaven-grade. If it were another person who said this, Zhu Xian'er definitely wouldn't pay attention. However, Ling Han was a low-level earth-grade alchemist, and in terms of real status he was far above her. Even the sect master of the half-moon sect would give some face to Ling Han. She said, my master suffered a Dao injury, and can't be cured unless it's a heaven-grade medicinal pill. Ling Han felt even more strange and said, your master is at most in the spiritual infant tier. How could he suffer a Dao injury? Dao injury, also known as the injury of great Dao, was a backlash when comprehending the power of heaven and earth. Only shattering void tier cultivators were qualified to comprehend heaven and earth, so naturally, only shattering void tier cultivators could suffer a Dao injury. In addition, shattering void tier cultivators could use the great Dao of heaven and earth, and those who were injured would also suffer a Dao injury. The problem was if a shattering void tier cultivator attacked, with the strength of the spiritual infant tier, would he only suffer a minor injury? He would have already died a few hundred times. Zhu Xian'er shook her head and didn't answer. Obviously, this matter involved a secret, and with a shallow friendship, how could she easily reveal the truth? Ling Han didn't pursue the matter, but obviously, he and Zhu Xian'er would have to compete for that crimson-red chilling ice grass. Sorry, I also need crimson-red chilling ice grass, he said. Zhu Xian'er immediately revealed a strong hostility. This was her master's life-saving medicine. Moreover, she agreed to fight for Ying Hong because the latter promised to find other main ingredients for her, and go to the middle state to ask a heaven-grade medicinal pill to help her concoct the pill. Chapter 389. Hunyou also revealed her ferocity, daring to reveal killing intent towards Ling Han, causing the little girl to immediately enter battle mode. Her small body was tense, ready to attack. Ling Han pressed his hand on Hunyou's shoulder to stop her from acting recklessly, and said, "Let me guess, there are 4 kinds of heaven-grade medicinal pills that can heal Dao wounds, but only the subduing tiger heavenly luck pill needs crimson-red chilling ice grass." Zhu Xian'er's pupils immediately contracted slightly, because Ling Han was right. She was gathering medicinal ingredients to concoct the subduing tiger heavenly luck pill. Ling Han nodded. Coming was correct and said, "The main ingredients of the subduing tiger heavenly luck pill are 9 Dao cry fruit, for divine wolf grass, and extreme dark dragon emperor fruit. The main ingredients can't be replaced, but the supplementary ingredients can." "You're saying all this just so I won't compete with you for the crimson-red chilling ice grass." Zhu Xian'er immediately saw through Ling Han's intention. Ling Han smiled and said, "That's right. However, I'm not afraid of you, but because we'll be fighting side by side in the future, I'm giving you a suggestion and advice. You can't compete with me. However, don't worry if you can't get the crimson-red chilling ice grass, since the supplementary ingredients can be replaced." "Master Ling, even if the crimson-red chilling ice grass can be replaced, how many 7th-tier spirit herbs are there in the world?" Zhu Xian'er asked in return. "This crimson-red chilling ice grass, I must get it." Ling Han shrugged and said, "Then it depends on our own strength. However, when I snatch it, don't cry." Zhu Xian'er instantly wanted to roll her eyes. Was she a child crying? She was a bit annoyed. This was the first time she met someone who completely disregarded her charm, making her a bit uncomfortable. The second was obviously Hunyou. Her face was full of hostility, as if she was afraid she would snatch Ling Han from her. Pay, even if Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist, so what? At most, she would only ask him to concoct alchemical pills, and it was impossible for her to like him. The person she liked should be a genius in martial art, and not a fool who only knew how to concoct pills. "Yo, you guys seem to be having a good conversation. Did I come back at the wrong time?" Ying Hong walked over while swaying her plump buttocks. She was born with a slender waist, and as soon as she walked, she looked extremely flirtatious and unstoppable. Ling Han burst into laughter and said, "Not at all. Miss Ying, do you have any secret manuals on formations that I can borrow for reference?" Ying Hong rolled her eyes at Ling Han without the slightest hesitation and said, "What do you think the secret tome of array formations is? I said I'll let you study it, so you'll just take a look? I can use cultivation techniques and martial techniques of a similar level to exchange for it." Ling Han said solemnly. In this life he didn't need to spend time on alchemy, and he already had experience in martial art. He just had to retread it, and he had a lot of time left. Using it to learn array formations was just right. He'd seen the might of Ying Hong's array formation before, and it could even block Hunyou's attack. This was very extraordinary, and it made him very interested. Moreover, he'd definitely enter various historical sites in the future, and if he had high attainments in array formations, it would undoubtedly be of great help. Moreover, every sex treasure trove and medicinal garden were protected by array formations now, and blood-sucking origin gold could only open locks, not break through arrays. In Hong laughed mischievously and said, "All right, if you can bring out high-level cultivation techniques or martial techniques, I'll trade with you." "All right." Ling Han had no intention of staying, and immediately took his leave. He returned to pick out some cultivation techniques and martial techniques to exchange for a few array formations to study. It just so happened that he had something to do on this trip to the Dark Demon Forest. He left with Hu Niu, and instantly, only Zhu Xian'er and Yin Hong were left in the courtyard. This guy's really a freak. Ignoring my charm is fine, but even ignoring you, could he be a eunuch? Yin Hong said very strangely. Zhu Xian'er instantly blushed and said, "Sister Hong, you're shooting your mouth off again." As it turned out, the two girls already knew each other. It wasn't strange. Zhu Xian'er wanted to find the ingredients to concoct the subduing tiger heavenly luck pill. So the fastest way was through the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. So it was normal for Zhu Xian'er and Yin Hong to know each other. However, you can really consider it. This guy really could become a heaven-grade alchemist before 30 years old, comparable to a shattering void tier elite. With his help, it'd be much easier for you to find those main ingredients. Otherwise, how could a spiritual pedestal tier warrior like you get a 9th tier spirit herb? Yin Hong said again. Zhu Xian'er sighed. A few supplementary ingredients were still manageable, but 3 main ingredients really wanted her life. And what did she have? A peerless beauty. Could it be that she had to exchange her body for it? After Ling Han returned to the inn, he immediately entered the Black Tower and began to rummage through his mind, searching for suitable cultivation techniques and martial techniques. In the Black Tower, he was almost omnipotent. He obviously couldn't do things like resurrecting the dead. Over 100 charcoal pens moved at the same time, and sheets of paper floated in the air. With squeaking sounds, rows of words appeared on the paper. In just one night's work, Ling Han wrote out over 100 cultivation techniques and martial techniques. That's enough. He smiled faintly. Exiting the Black Tower, he went to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. "Mr. Ling returned so soon. Is it because you still miss Sister Zhu?" She set off early in the morning, heading towards the Dark Devil Forest, Yin Hong said with a smile. Ling Han also smiled and said, "I came specially to see Lady Yin." "What's there to see? I'm not even 1% as beautiful as Sister Zhu. I have some cultivation techniques and martial techniques here. Here, how many formations can you exchange for?" Ling Han directly threw out 10 cultivation techniques and martial techniques. Yin Hong didn't joke anymore. She picked up a cultivation technique and glanced at it, instantly revealing a shocked expression, and said, "Earth-grade cultivation technique?" She continued to pick up other books, her pretty face continuously changing color. These were not only earth-grade cultivation techniques, but their attributes were also different, suitable for people with various spirit bases. This was very rare. Mr. Ling is truly an extraordinary person. She sighed. Ling Han smiled and said, "Someone asked me to concoct pills, but couldn't pay the price, so they could only use cultivation techniques to make up the numbers." This was the truth, but it was something that happened in the previous life. For example, Sword Emperor and Nalan II were asked for 3 styles of black origin and wore elephant fist by him. Mr. Ling is so straightforward, then I won't hide my skills. Yin Hong wiped her right hand on the table, and 3 ancient books immediately appeared. They were definitely not made from ordinary materials, emitting an ancient aura by themselves. Ling Han picked up one of them. These 3 books were respectively written: Basic Basics of Formations 1, Basic Basics of Formations 2, and Basic Basics of Formations 3. He shook his head and said, "Lady Yin, I'll take out 10 earth-grade cultivation techniques, and you'll give me 3 formation basics." Yin Hong giggled, threw out another book and said, "Plus this small heavenly origin spirit snake formation, no more. Otherwise, I'd rather not exchange." "That's more like it." Ling Han picked up the small heavenly origin spirit snake formation and revealed a smile. Chapter 390. Although Ling Han wrote over 100 martial arts and cultivation techniques yesterday, he didn't intend to hand them all over. 3 books on introduction to formations and 1 book on formations were enough for him to study for a while. Thus, he decided to leave and head for the Dark Demon Forest. Bringing Hu Niu, he hired a carriage. This journey would take more than 10 days, so it was better to hire a carriage as a means of transportation. In the carriage, Hunyo happily nibbled on jerky, while Ling Han took out Introduction to Formations and flipped through it. Soon he revealed a solemn expression. Martial art was a process of self-cultivation, viewing the human body as a great treasure that unearthed endless potential. There was a saying in the world of martial art: one person, one world. It meant that when one cultivated martial art to the extreme, the martial artist himself could become a huge world, possessing supreme power. Formations, however, were the exact opposite. This Tao worshipped the power of nature, and its main purpose was to borrow the power of nature and transform it for one's own use. Thus, the key was how to borrow the power of nature. To borrow the power of nature, there needed to be a medium called the formation eye. The formation eye could take various forms, such as a sword, a saber, or a flag. However, not any sword, stone, or flag could be used as the formation eye. There were very strict requirements. The first was the quality of the material itself, and the second was the formation pattern inscribed on it. The person who wrote this book liked to use flags as the formation eye, so they were called formation flags. Like martial art, formation flags were divided into 10 levels, and the formation laid by different levels of formation flags was also different in power. High-level array flags could be used to arrange low-level array formations, but the reverse was not possible. High-level array formations required high-level array flags to arrange, otherwise the array flags would not be able to withstand the world energy and would instantly explode. Thus, to do a good job, one must first sharpen their tools, find suitable materials to make formation flags or other formation eyes, and then discuss the layout of the formation. Ling Han was eager to give it a try. When he passed by a large city, he spent 30,000 origin crystals to buy a piece of purple patterned gold, which weighed more than half a kilogram. It was incomparably expensive. This was a rank 5 forging material, which could be used to create Sea of Souls realm spirit weapons. Of course, it was precious. Fortunately, there was only 1 kilogram of it, which was not enough to make swords or blades. Otherwise, 30,000 yuan crystals would not be enough to buy it. Ling Han immediately entered the Black Tower. Inside, he could summon raging flames and easily smelt this piece of rare metal into 7 small metal rods. Because he lacked materials, he didn't make them into formation flags. Anyways, the most important thing was to carve the formation patterns, and as for what kind of formation eye it was completely irrelevant. This was the first step. The second step was to carve the array patterns on the iron rod. This was the most crucial step. The array patterns drew upon the power of heaven and earth. Whatever type of array pattern was used, the effect would be completely different. There was a reason why Ling Han forged the 7 metal rods, and it was based on the small heavenly origin spirit snake array. As long as he could carve the formation patterns on them, they would be able to form the true eye of the array. When the time came, he would scatter them around his body, and the array would automatically form, which could have both defensive and offensive effects. The problem was how to carve the array patterns. This wasn't like drawing where one could carve according to the pattern. The array patterns could draw upon the power of heaven and earth, which was a kind of understanding, just like the will of martial art. If you understood it, then you understood it. If you didn't, then you didn't understand it. There was no way to tell the difference. To carve the array patterns, one had to first understand the formation. Thus, some people with a deep understanding were high-level formation masters, and some with a shallow understanding were low-level formation masters. In his previous life, Ling Han had studied various formations. Of course, at that time he studied how to break them and how to find the holes in the formation, but this could be used as a reference. What's more, he also possessed the divine sense of heaven tier and the comprehension of martial art, so studying low-level formations was too easy. He constantly sighed, so that's how it is, and made rapid progress in the path of formations. 5 days later, he threw the 3 introductory formation books to the side, picked up a stone at random, and began carving array patterns on it. Every array pattern had to be completed in one go, without any pause. As long as there was a delay, it would affect the operation of the power of heaven and earth. A formation I could at most have 3 pauses, otherwise it was equivalent to being scrapped. A 4th-level formation I could carve at least 9 array patterns, and at most 15, all of which had to be squeezed onto such a small metal rod. The small Tianyuan spirit snake formation required 7 formation eyes to be set up, and each formation eye was limited to 15 formation patterns. It could be considered a high-grade formation among 4th-grade formations. From this point of view, Yin Hong's price was quite fair. Ling Han began to inscribe the formation patterns. When he had inscribed 15 formation patterns on a piece of rock, he examined them carefully and discovered that at least 8 of them were wrong. Moreover, the few that were not wrong also had many pauses. It was fine, he didn't expect to become a formation master immediately, so he'd take it slow. On the 11th day from Extreme Yang City, Ling Han finally arrived at the outskirts of the Dark Demon Forest. The coachman was unwilling to advance any further, and after Ling Han alighted, he immediately whipped the horse and hurriedly left. This was an extremely chaotic place. It wasn't occupied by any power, but it just so happened that this place was rich in spirit grasses. It attracted a large number of powers to come here to gather spirit grasses. Because of the huge profits, conflicts often broke out here. Blood and deaths were normal things. There was no ruler in the Dark Demon Forest, but there were 4 relatively stronger forces. Because they had developed in the Dark Demon Forest, they were equivalent to local tyrants. Even great forces like the Winter Moon Sect and the Beast Emperor Sect would not be willing to provoke them. These 4 parties were the Bloodlight Tower, the Heavenly Silkworm Court, the Eroding Bone Palace, and the Gust Demon Hall. It was said that they all had Flower Blossom tier elites. Aside from these 4 great parties, there were also many medium and small parties that struggled to survive in the cracks, and even wanted to replace the 4 great parties. It was said that many medium parties even received support from great clans like the Winter Moon Sect, but no one could say for sure whether it was true or not. The 4 great parties each had many camps in the Dark Demon Forest that were open to the public, equivalent to barriers that provided protection for martial artists who gathered herbs. However, they definitely didn't do charity, and if one wanted to enter the camp they had to pay money, origin crystals of course. Without origin crystals, they could use spirit herbs or refining materials as a substitute. In the camp, no one was allowed to use force. This was the most basic rule. Once they left, it didn't matter even if they were beheaded and sent flying. Ling Han walked casually, but his entire mind was on formations. After these 10 days of research, he also developed a strong interest in formations, and if it was combined with martial art, it could display extraordinary effects. In reality, formations were closely related to every martial artist. For the simplest example, spirit tools actually belonged to formations, and imprinting the intent of martial art on them was the most superficial formation pattern. However, if the formation pattern was also imprinted on the spirit tool, the two would be combined, and the power release would naturally be stronger. "Brother, you're alone, why don't you join us?" He walked slowly and was soon overtaken by a team. Someone offered him an olive branch. Chapter 391. Ling Han sighed and said, "Tell me, who did you two assassinate this time?" And actually failed again, provoking others to turn around and hunt you down? How do you know we are assassins?" The younger sister asked curiously. "Until now, you two still haven't recognized my voice." Ling Han was speechless. How could this pair of beautiful sisters be called assassins? The younger sister hurriedly lit up the oil lamp and waved it in front of Ling Han. She could not help but cry out, pointed at Ling Han and said, "It's you. Why are you seeing ghosts here?" This pair of beautiful assassin sisters was naturally the sisters Lu Feng Er and Lu Ru Er. Previously, they had failed to assassinate Suku Xian, and later left with Yun Shuang. Now that he thought about it, they had indeed come from Fire Country. However, it was too much of a coincidence that they would actually meet in such a huge country. Ling Han smiled and said, "There's no need to worry about why I'm here for now. How are you going to deal with your matters?" "We'll have to trouble Major Han to hide us sisters again," Lu Feng Er said with a smile. This young man was so calm and collected that he did not seem like a teenager at all, and gave her a strange sense of security. "Che, you don't even know who you've offended to run to such a remote and desolate place to seek refuge. And you still want to protect us?" Lu Ru Er was still the same as always. If she did not say a few words, she would feel uncomfortable. Ling Han pursed his lips and said, "Then I'm really sorry. Please leave as you came." "Petty, I was just saying." Is there a need to take it so seriously? Lu Ru'er pouted. Honestly, who did you two offend this time? Ling Han sighed. Lu Ru'er was instantly full of herself, and said, the person we're assassinating this time is an important official of Fire Country, Na Jian. What kind of strange name is that? Ling Han hurriedly interrupted. Na Jian, a stinky man, actually chose such a sissy name. Lu Ru'er seemed to have found a confidant, and her face was filled with agreement. That's right. I said that this person's name is not good. Lu Ru'er felt helpless and said, the name is not important. The key is that Na Jian has suddenly appeared in the recent half a year, and has become the person that the Fire Emperor values the most. He has bewitched the Fire Emperor into mining an extremely strange mine, and every time he returns from mining, the workers would suddenly die the next day. But the Fire Emperor has not stopped at all, and has continuously mobilized manpower from all over the country to excavate that mine. Whoever dares to disobey will be killed. Now everyone is in a state of panic and they all hate that Na Jian to the core. Lu Ru'er continued. Our Falling Flower Palace has received orders from countless people in the whole country to kill that Na Jian, to rid the country of a scourge. Tisk, assassins actually have feelings? Ling Han said with a smile. Don't look down on us. There are 3 kinds of people we do not kill, Lu Ru'er said proudly. We do not kill children, we do not kill the elderly, and we do not kill those who do good deeds. Ling Han nodded with a smile and said, and then what? You all went to assassinate that Na Jian, but in the end failed, and were instead pursued by him for thousands of miles. Lu Ru'er pouted and said, can't you make a more noble guess about us? After the assassination was successful, we successfully shook off our pursuers. What do you mean by he? Lu Ru'er placed her hands on her hips, looking very displeased. Hong! A heavy sound was heard from outside. It should be the sound of a house collapsing. The voice from before rang out again. When the Imperial Guards are handling matters, they can act first and report later. Anyone who has not arrived at the east gate of the town in 15 minutes' time will be killed without mercy. Ling Han nodded and said, that Na Jian is indeed very favored. When he was assassinated, the Imperial Guards were actually dispatched to pursue the murderer. Hung, but there were 7 high-level spiritual ocean tier warriors chasing after us. Thankfully, we were quick-witted and ran away quickly, Lu Ru'er said proudly. Young Master Han. Zhu Wujia's voice was heard from outside the door. Ling Han thought for a moment then said, send those people away. You can teach them a suitable lesson, but there is no need to kill them. Yes. Zhu Wujia received his orders and left. He was now in the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and had also refined the heavenly luck stone. His battle prowess had soared to 11 battle stars, and he was definitely one of the strongest in Fire Country. Yet Ling Han sighed. With such a ruckus, the Ling clan residents would have to move again. This pair of sisters really kept creating trouble for him. Hey, that little follower of yours could also deal with those Imperial Guards outside? Those are all high-level spiritual ocean tier warriors. Lu Ru'er called out in disbelief. Don't be impatient. Ling Han pressed his hands together, and casually asked, is Yun Shuang still well? She's very well. She is now a famous entertainer in the Imperial City, and everyone would be proud to hear Lady Shuang personally play a song. Who knows how many people want to marry her? Lu Ru'er said, looking at Ling Han a little mischievously, thinking of Ling Han's disappointed expression. How could Ling Han possibly take Yun Shuang to heart? He had only thought of her when he thought of this pair of sisters, and so asked in passing. After a short while, Zhu Wujia returned and said at the door, Young Master Han, the matter has been resolved. Do you have any other instructions? Ling Han nodded and said, go and rest. Yes. Only then did Zhu Wujia leave. Lu Feng'er and her sisters' faces were filled with shock. After a while, Lu Ru'er finally said, Hey, is that subordinate of yours boasting? Ling Han shrugged and said, can you still hear the barking of dogs now? Lu Ru'er was startled at first, and only then did she realize that Ling Han had referred to those Imperial Guards as dogs. She could not help but giggle, but immediately covered her mouth with her hand and said, I really can't hear them anymore. Lu Feng'er's face was also filled with shock, and she said, Young Master Han, Those are all high-level spiritual ocean tier martial artists. Ling Han laughed and said, the trouble has been resolved. You two can also leave and never see each other again. Encountering you two is definitely not a good thing. Pay we're not jinxes. Lu Ru'er's face was filled with displeasure, but she immediately said, since your subordinates are so powerful, why don't you lend them to us for a few days, and help us kill that Na Jiyan? Ling Han sneered and said, you still have the nerve to say such things? To be an assassin like you, it's really embarrassing. Che, this time we are getting rid of a scourge for the people. Lu Ru'er grabbed Ling Han and said, I don't care anymore. Since you are now in fire country, and coincidentally bumped into us, this is the arrangement of the heavens, and we need you to help us. Ling Han did not comment, but he could not deny that this matter was really too coincidental. Lu Feng-er and her sister could not have gone anywhere else, and yet they just had to come to the place where he was living in seclusion. He rubbed his chin. If the Fire Emperor continued to act so willfully, then no matter where the Ling clan moved to, they could possibly be conscripted by the imperial family to dig up that whatever mine. Unless they left fire country. However, what kind of mine was it that could actually cause the Fire Emperor to go crazy to the point of destroying the foundation of his own country? Ling Han asked, do you know what kind of mine it is? I don't know. I only know that strange ores can be dug out from there every day, and they are all sent to the imperial family. Lu Feng-er shook her head. Ling Han, on the other hand, felt a little curious. Oh. Chapter 392. This was a herbalist team, with 7 martial artists as guards and 12 herbalist farmers, all carrying bamboo baskets. There was also a red-clothed beauty who looked like the owner, a total of 20 people. A herbalist team of this scale could only be considered a small-scale team in the Dark Demon Forest, with over 100 or even over 1,000 herbalist teams. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. The 7 guards were actually all in the spiritual ocean tier, which was quite impressive. The one who sent the invitation was a sturdy man in his 40s. He was tall and well-built. His arms were so thick that they surpassed Ling Han's waist, and his muscles were shockingly strong. Without waiting for Ling Han to answer, the red-clothed woman spoke first, somewhat displeased. Guard Wu, you want to recruit people into the team, why don't you ask for my opinion first? The burly man laughed and said, before we set off, we agreed that we would recruit a total of 10 guards, but now we have only recruited 7. As the captain of the guards, of course I have the right to recruit people. That's because the others aren't qualified, the red-clothed woman said. He's qualified. The sturdy man pointed at Ling Han. The 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier still not enough? What, such a youngster was actually at the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? The others were shocked, feeling that Ling Han was too young. Miss Ding let him join the team. Yeah, the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, not weak. The other guards all urged. The cultivation of the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier wasn't high, but advancing to this level in his teens meant that Ling Han's background wasn't simple. Although this was an extremely chaotic place, if there were sects like the Winter Moon sect or the Half Moon sect, then they could save lives at crucial moments. So, these people obviously wouldn't oppose Ling Han joining, adding insurance to their lives. The red-clothed woman thought and said, all right, but Guard Wu, you're responsible for making sure he doesn't cause trouble. Deal. The sturdy man nodded with a smile, then cracked a smile at Ling Han, and said, little bro, how about 1 origin crystal a day? Such a good job isn't something you can encounter every day. Spiritual Ocean Realm warriors could only condense 1 origin crystal a month, but now they could get 1 in a day. The treatment was indeed not bad. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. You guys are talking to yourselves. I don't think I said I wanted to join you. So you still have an opinion. The woman in red wasn't very happy to begin with. When she heard that Ling Han was against joining them, she immediately became even more dissatisfied. How dare you? Slap his face. Ling Han shook his head. He felt that he was really unjustly implicated. He was just taking a stroll and didn't provoke anyone. How did he get into trouble? Could it be that he really had a troublesome constitution and would cause trouble wherever he went? Do you think I'm easy to bully? Angered, he raised his hand and slapped the red-clothed woman. Stop. The 7 guards shouted at the same time and moved to block Ling Han. These people's tier varied, but the weakest was at the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, while the strongest reached the 9th layer. However, none of them had battle prowess that surpassed their tier. After all, most of them were very normal. Ling Han laughed lightly, and instantly, sword intent burst forth. Xiao 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 xiao, 7 flashes of sword chi shot out, slicing towards the 7 guards. What was his battle prowess? When he was at the 1st layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he had 16 stars and now it shot up to 20 stars. Compared to the strongest person on the other side, his battle prowess surpassed 11 stars. This was an absolute suppression. Thus, within the 7 flashes of sword chi, the 7 guards were sent flying at the same time. Fortunately, Ling Han was merciful and only left a wound on each of their chests. Otherwise, one strike would have taken their lives. Pa, the red-clothed woman's face was slapped solidly, and 3 of her teeth were knocked out. Don't always look at people with dog eyes. This slap is a small lesson for you. If there's a next time, I'll take your life, Ling Han said coldly. The red-clothed woman clenched her teeth and had an expression of disbelief on her pretty face. Firstly, Ling Han was only at the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, yet he could send her 7 guards flying with one strike. Secondly, this guy actually dared to hit her. She was a noble daughter of the Ding family, and she was as beautiful as a flower. Was this guy blind to even lay his hands on such a beautiful face? Ling Han turned and left. Whether it was the 7 guards or the farmers, they were all silent. Ling Han's strength surpassed their imagination, and they still hadn't recovered from the shock. A bunch of trash, the red-clothed woman rebuked angrily. She covered her red and swollen pretty face and said, "Quickly go to Rising Wind Stronghold. Clan brother Gao Yang is there. Ask him to deal with that damned brat." Miss Ding, that youngster has the cultivation of the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier at such a young age. And his battle prowess is even more shocking. He definitely has a great background, so why don't we just let it go? The brawny man surnamed Wu advised. Since he was the one who invited her, he felt somewhat responsible. Humph, in the Dark Devil Forest, so what if he has a great background? He died in vain. The red-clothed woman's gaze was bitter. She couldn't swallow this insult. Let's go. The group continued forward. After walking for half a day, a stronghold appeared in front of Ling Han. This was the territory of the Gus Demon clan, providing a place to shelter from the wind and rain for martial artists. Ling Han also wanted to inquire about the crimson red chilling ice grass, so he entered the stronghold at the price of 1 origin crystal. The stronghold wasn't too big, but it had the area of a small village. The outer perimeter was made of sturdy tree trunks as a defensive wall, while the houses inside were made of bamboo, with extremely poor soundproofing. This place really had all sorts of people. Ling Han noticed that there were a great many women dressed in revealing clothes standing by the roadside, casting flirtatious glances at the passers-by. If they caught their eye, they would leave in a group, and very soon moaning sounds that could make one's blood boil could be heard from within the bamboo houses. For martial artists, after experiencing a tense adventure, they naturally hoped to relax a bit. Where there was a need, there would be a market. Even in a dangerous place like the Dark Devil Forest, the most ancient industry was nurtured. As Ling Han walked, he was obviously teased by these women. He ignored them and directly arrived at a restaurant. He casually ordered a few things, mainly to find people to inquire about the situation. "Hey, did you guys hear? The famous fairy Zhu came here a few days ago." "What? Zhu Xian'er? Known as the #1 beauty in the North region. Is she really that beautiful? More than that, I think she should be called the #1 beauty in the world. However, since she dared to come to the Dark Devil Forest, isn't she afraid of walking into a tiger's den? Hehe. Don't know how many people want to take this beauty as their personal pet. Moreover, this is the Dark Devil Forest. If someone is lost here, even the Half-Moon sect can't do anything. You don't have a share anyway. Pei, you don't have a share either." Hearing everyone's words, Ling Han shook his head. Zhu Xian'er was only in the spiritual pedestal tier, and if she encountered a flower blossom tier warrior, she wouldn't even have the chance to escape. To think she dared to come here alone. He raised his wine cup, moved closer to a table of 3, and said, "Brothers, let me ask you guys, is there a place where cold and heat interweave?" Chapter 393. Young man, you just came to the Dark Devil Forest, right? A brawny man in his 30s looked at Ling Han with a smile. Yes. Ling Han nodded. This could be seen at a glance, unlike other people who carried a strong earthy smell that came from sunbathing and night dew in the forest. The brawny man laughed, extended his hand and said, "Here, everything is a transaction. If you want to ask questions, you have to give benefits." "How much?" Ling Han said indifferently. His wallet was now bulging again, so he was naturally indifferent to origin crystals. 1 origin crystal. The brawny man raised a finger. 1 essence crystal for 1 question black. Ling Han didn't care. As long as he could find crimson red chilling ice grass, he wouldn't feel heartache even if he had to pay 1,000,000 origin crystals. He immediately took out an origin crystal and handed it over. The brawny man took the origin crystal and laughed. "It's time to answer the question." Ling Han knocked on the table. "Okay." The brawny man nodded and said, "I don't know." Ling Han's gaze immediately sharpened, and he said, "Are you messing with me?" "Young man, I'm teaching you a lesson. Be careful when you're outside, don't trust people easily." The brawny man laughed loudly, not at all worried that Ling Han would attack him. Because this was the territory of the Gale Demon clan, if Ling Han dared to attack here, he would be chased out at best or killed at worst. Otherwise, this place wouldn't have become a safe haven. It was said that there were even many vicious wanted criminals in a stronghold like this, being chased by forces like the Winter Moon sect and the Beast Emperor sect, fleeing here. However, they didn't dare to attack in the stronghold, which showed how deep the 4 great forces' tyranny was in people's hearts. Ling Han saw his arrogance and casually waved his hand. Instantly, 10 ginsengs appeared on the table, each as thick as a child's arm, and the root hairs were twisted like dragons. Hiss! Once everyone saw it, their eyes widened. This was at least a 200 to 300-year-old treasure ginseng. The Dark Devil Forest had this kind of treasure ginseng, but it needed to go deep into the heart of the forest because it was too dangerous. Normally, not to mention people entering, even demonic beasts were very rare. Therefore, there were a lot of spirit herbs and their medicinal age was astonishing. This kind of treasure ginseng could be sold for dozens of yuan crystals, which was definitely more than enough. 10 of them would be worth a few hundred yuan crystals, which was a huge fortune. If Sea of Souls realm warriors did not steal or rob them, it would take dozens of years to make them. For a time, everyone's breathing quickened while their eyes turned red, and they wished for nothing more than to make a move and seize it. Ling Han smiled calmly, pointed at the brawny man from just now, and said, "Whoever kills him for me, these ginseng will belong to them." In an instant, everyone's gazes were fixed on the burly man. This person was only at the 2nd layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and for a late-stage spiritual ocean tier martial artist, killing him wouldn't be as easy as flipping one's hand, but it wouldn't be too difficult. They could earn a few hundred yuan crystals just by lifting a finger. Where else could they find such a good business? And then look for it. 100-year-old ginseng was a great tonic. Martial artists like them usually fought with humans and beasts, inevitably leaving behind internal injuries. This was something that normal healing medicinal pills couldn't touch, and only such a great tonic could completely heal them. Such a treasure could only be encountered, not sought. "Young man, fighting is not allowed in the stronghold," someone said. Ling Han smiled and said, "No matter, you guys just keep watch. Although I will leave soon, I will leave 10 ginseng with the stronghold master. Whoever kills him can go find the stronghold master to receive it. Now everyone can rest assured, right?" Okay. Everyone nodded. There were indeed people in the stronghold that would issue missions and ask for help, but if it was done through the Gale Demon Hall, it would be hard to avoid a cut. Thus, everyone hoped that the burly man would quickly leave the stronghold and quickly kill him, then directly find Ling Han to receive the reward. This way, they wouldn't have to be cut by the Gale Demon Hall. That burly man's face turned green. He didn't expect that he would be tricked to death just because he cheated a piece of essence crystal from Ling Han. He quickly took out that piece of essence crystal and threw it at Ling Han like it was a hot potato. "I don't want your essence crystal anymore. Quickly take back the bounty. Which family's 2nd generation is this? To actually waste a treasure ginseng like this. Does your mother know that you are so awesome?" Ling Han didn't take it and said, "Take it. Just nice, you can go and order a good coffin." That burly man was so scared that he was about to cry. He just wanted to take advantage of a little, but who would have thought that it would bring about a fatal disaster? He quickly knelt down in front of Ling Han and said, "Young master, I was wrong, please forgive me." "You really have to know your wrongs," Ling Han said with a smile. "I really have to know." The burly man constantly waved his hand and slapped himself in the face. Each slap was very forceful to the point that blood came out. Ling Han nodded and said, "All right, this bounty is cancelled." Immediately, that burly man let out a long sigh of relief, but the others were dissatisfied. You fucking with people, there weren't many people here who were easy to get along with. Each and every one of them stared at Ling Han with an ominous glint in their eyes. As long as Ling Han left the stronghold, Ling Han didn't care and said, "The bounty just now is cancelled and replaced with a new one. Whoever tells me where there is a place in the forest where cold and heat intersect, these 10 treasured ginseng will belong to him." Really? Everyone's expression changed back to one of surprise. Ling Han nodded and said, "Of course it's true. However, if anyone treats me like a fool and randomly tells me a place, then I don't mind opening a bounty on him." Everyone sucked in their teeth. Just now, that burly man had only tricked Ling Han of a piece of essence crystal, and the other party had taken out 10 treasured ginseng to put a bounty on his head. If he tricked Ling Han of 10 treasured ginseng, how much would the other party offer as a bounty? This kind of second-generation ancestor was really scary, rich and willful. For a moment, everyone was silent. Some people originally wanted to fool him, but they were scared stiff. "Young master, I know of a place that suits your requirements." After a while, someone opened his mouth and said a place. It was in the northwest of the Dark Devil Forest, and he also gave Ling Han a map, indicating the location. Ling Han inquired carefully, but he was very disappointed, because there was indeed a place where cold and heat intersect, but it was far from what he wanted. However, he still gave the other party 10 treasured ginseng to establish his credibility. Does anyone else know such a place? One piece of information for 10 treasured ginseng. With a wave of his hand, Ling Han took out another 100-year-old ginseng. In any case, these things were like cabbages to him. Someone really did get a reward, and it immediately made the others excited. Even some of the onlookers were eager to give it a try. It didn't matter if they didn't know, couldn't they go and find out? "I will stay here for 2 days. If there's any news, come find me." Ling Han threw down these words, left the restaurant and rented a guest room. Chapter 394. Damn guy. The brawny man was called Pu Chuan, at the 3rd layer of the spiritual ocean tier, which wasn't considered weak. He could come and go as he pleased, and could barely be called an elite, but he was forced to kneel and beg for mercy to Ling Han in front of everyone's eyes. How humiliating was that? With such a great enmity, and coveting Ling Han's belongings, how could he let Ling Han leave without doing anything? A mere 5th layer spiritual ocean tier spoiled brat's battle prowess definitely didn't surpass 4 stars. Even if he couldn't beat him alone, there were still 9 people here, right? "Youngster, hand over your spatial ring obediently, and we'll let you live," another person said. This was obviously a lie. After getting the spatial ring, they'd make their move. Ling Han smiled and said to Hu Niu, "Niu, are you calling me an idiot?" Ling Han obviously isn't an idiot. Ling Han is a smart person, Hu Niu quickly said, then patted her small chest and added, "Niu is also a smart person, but someone insisted on playing me like a monkey." Ling Han shook his head. Hu Niu instantly revealed a ferocious glint and said, "Niu will bite them all to death." Niu, don't kill with your mouth, it's too dirty." Ling Han rubbed her small head. Hu Niu instantly nodded repeatedly. Although she never thought biting people to death was dirty, since Ling Han didn't like it, she obviously avoided doing it. "You guys, have you had enough?" Pu Chuan and the others were furious. This adult and child actually dared to tease them. But strangely, they didn't seem to see this little girl yesterday, right? It probably followed him into the village and stayed in the bamboo lair all this time. Everyone quickly understood what was going on. Since he's disobedient, then we'll just kill him to avoid any more trouble. Pu Chuan and the others clamored. In the entire stronghold, there were waves and waves of people who had designs on Ling Han. So they naturally had to make the first move to gain the upper hand, lest others snatch him away. I'll do it. Puchuan immediately jumped out. Chong, his long saber was unsheathed, and he slashed at Ling Han. Hunyo moved. Xiao, in an instant she had leaped into the air above Puchuan. Her small fist shot out. Suddenly, Puchuan's head spun 7 or 8 times around his neck. The skin on his neck was twisted off and his head fell off. Blood spurted 30 feet high like a blood fountain before it quickly fell back down. Martial artists had vigorous chi and blood, especially those in the spiritual ocean tier. Even if their heads were chopped off, they didn't die immediately. Instead, they waved their arms and legs for a while before crashing to the ground, but their arms and legs were still twitching. How is this possible? In any case, Puchuan had the cultivation of the 3rd layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Yet he was killed in one punch. Moreover, the one who did it was a little girl who looked only 5 or 6 years old. How could anyone believe this? Ho! Hunyo bared her teeth and roared, once again charging out. Pa 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 pa. With each punch she quickly reaped lives. With her terrifying speed, even spiritual pedestal tier warriors would have a headache, not to mention spiritual ocean tier warriors. They didn't even have the power to resist, and all of them had their heads blown off by her punches. Run! Of the 10 people, only 3 were left and they all broke into a run. However, it was a joke to compete with Hunyo in terms of speed. In the time of 2 breaths, the 3 people's hearts had all exploded with a single punch. 10 people all killed. Hunyo wasn't done yet, and her fierce gaze looked behind her. Her divine sense was extremely sensitive, and she discovered that there were more people behind. However, the distance was too far, and she couldn't discover each person's specific location in a short time. Run! Those people were clear that 10 spiritual ocean tier warriors were actually killed by a little girl as easily as crushing dry weeds. This kind of battle prowess was absolutely abnormal. They didn't want to die, and hurriedly fled towards the stronghold. Ling Han only smiled, and didn't chase after them to start a massacre. Let's go. He held Hunyo's hand and continued forward. Truly not simple. On a large tree in the distance, an old man in his 60s stared at the entire process. Ding Gaoyang, not only that youngster but that little girl is also a monster. That speed, tsk is extremely shocking. Behind the old man stood Ding Gaoyang and Ding Wanqing. Their expressions were quite respectful. Elder Mo, you're a spiritual pedestal tier warrior. No matter how freakish they are, they can't possibly be your match. Ding Gaoyang hurriedly flattered. Elder Mo enjoyed it, revealing a smile and said, to deal with 2 spiritual ocean tier warriors, the price tag won't be the same as before, it'll have to be doubled. Ding Gaoyang instantly revealed a pained expression. Could it be cheap to ask a spiritual pedestal tier warrior to act? Now it had to be doubled. He could only hope that the things that Ling Han brought were worth the price, or else he'd suffer a huge loss. Elder Mo glanced at Ding Wanqing again, revealing an extremely infatuated expression, and said, also, let Wanqing stay at my place tonight. Ding Gaoyang was about to jump up. This old man was too much. He was actually coveting his woman. He snorted and said, Old Mo, don't go too far. Don't forget who my brother is. Elder Mo couldn't help but tremble. Xian was a figure on the prodigy roll 2 years ago, and his ranking wasn't low either. Anyone who could be on this roll, as long as they didn't die, would definitely reach the flower blossom tier in the future. There had never been an exception. This was the Dark Demon Forest where Fist spoke. If he offended Xian, the consequences would be unthinkable. Even the Gale Demon Hall wouldn't stand up for him, and his death would be in vain. Then double the reward. Elder Mo snorted coldly, leaping down from the top of the tree, and charged in Ling Han and Hunyo's direction. He was displeased, so he took it out on these 2. Follow, I want to see how that brat dies, Ding Wanqing said to Ding Gaoyang. The 2 also chased. How fast was the spiritual pedestal tier's speed? Ling Han and Hunyo didn't walk too fast, so in a minute or 2, Elder Mo already caught up. Hong, the presence of the spiritual pedestal tier spread out, extremely terrifying. Brat, leave your life, he said menacingly. Ling Han stopped, turned around, glanced at the other, and said, if I remember correctly, you should be one of the guards in the stronghold, surnamed Mo, right? Gaga, that's right. Elder Mo laughed strangely. Since you know my identity, why don't you surrender? As they spoke, Ding Gaoyang and Ding Wanqing also arrived. Ling Han glanced at Ding Gaoyang and couldn't help but realize that this was the middle-aged man who told him about the place where cold and heat intertwined in the morning. So he was deliberately luring him out of the stronghold so that people could deal with him. He laughed loudly and said, "Old man, one moment you're a guard, the next moment you're a bandit. Your old face really knows how to change. How dare you?" Elder Mo was furious and struck out with a palm from afar. Origin power blasted out, turning into a giant palm that slapped towards Ling Han. This was a furious attack from a spiritual pedestal tier elite. Wouldn't the power be shocking? Chapter 395. Ordinary stones with a sliver of source power. Small tower very quickly transmitted its divine sense to him. Ordinary. Ling Han was surprised. Stones that could directly increase the cultivation of flower blossom tier. How could they be ordinary? If there were countless of these ordinary stones, it was guaranteed that even a pig could advance to the shattering void tier. Even becoming a god was not impossible. It would not be an exaggeration to call them divine stones, so how could they be ordinary? Origin power. Ling Han shook his head. Why don't I feel it? It's not origin power but source power, Small Tower explained. Ling Han was startled and said, like the chaos source rock source power? That's right, but the amount is pitifully small. I don't care to extract it at all, Small Tower said very proudly. That was right. Ling Han bared his teeth. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? He said, I don't mind if you give me some, the more the better. He did not need to comprehend martial arts, but his parents did. If there was a large amount of this kind of ore, he believed that Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang would be able to smoothly break through to the flower blossom tier. He suddenly understood why the Fire Emperor wanted to obtain these ores at all costs. That was because this would allow the Fire Emperor, who did not have any cultivation techniques and did not have sufficient comprehension ability, to complete a great leap to transcend mortality. However, if he wanted to persuade the Fire Emperor to stop, it would be a bit difficult, because this involved a leap of a major tier, and also an additional 200 years of lifespan. If one did not enter the flower blossom tier, a mortal only had a mere 100 years of lifespan, and the Fire Emperor had at least completed half of it. Stopping him from entering the flower blossom tier was equivalent to taking away his life, so he believed that this Fire Emperor would definitely not be easily persuaded. If he won't listen, then I'll just have to beat him until he agrees. Ling Han thought violently. These ores also contain an extremely high amount of violent factors. If you absorb too much with your current cultivation level, you will definitely not be able to control it. Your personality will change greatly, and you will become a madman who only knows how to kill, Small Tower replied. When Ling Han heard this, he immediately dispelled the idea of giving his parents some of these ores, and said, even the Black Tower is unable to dispel this kind of emotion? Human nature is the most difficult thing to fathom. Unless I can completely wipe out your memories, Small Tower suggested. Then forget it. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head. He did not want to wipe out the memories of his parents and turn them into complete strangers. Furthermore, he had a very high chance of sending his parents up to the flower blossom tier as soon as possible. With an extra 200 years, he should be able to enter into the realm of immortals and obtain a divine pill for his parents, allowing them to reach the heavens in a single step. Ling Han was still very confident in his own talent in alchemy. Ling Han decided to first deal with Na Zhiyan and the Fire Emperor, and then return to study this mine to see what exactly was hidden inside. The two of them very quickly exited the mine and walked towards the city walls. Halt! The guards called out again. The order they had received was that no one was allowed to leave this place. Bo Wenlin also appeared, a cold smirk appearing at the corners of his lips, and said, young man, you really do not know what's good for you. You even dare to enter this mine of death. Now, you only have less than half a day to live. Ling Han smiled faintly. His fate was extremely tough, so unless he stayed in the mine for a few years, he would not be cursed. Moreover, even if he was really cursed, didn't he still have the Black Tower? This divine tool had an extraordinary ability in the area of dispelling evil and curses. Since I only have half a day to live, then I have to make a big fuss, he said, pretending to be crazy. Bo Wenlin instantly looked wary. Previously, he had not made a move because he felt that Ling Han was not someone to be trifled with. And now, this guy who was not someone to be trifled with only had less than half a day to live. That was even worse. Who would be willing to risk their lives against someone who was definitely going to die? Youngster, you are already someone who is definitely going to die, so I can't be bothered to lower myself to your level. However, I will follow you and watch you die, he said. Ling Han revealed a mischievous grin, and said, do you really dare to follow me wherever I go? Haha, there are places in this world that I, Bo Wenlin, do not dare to go. Bo Wenlin laughed coldly. Then come, Ling Han said with a smile. He strode forwards, heading in the direction of the imperial city. Meanwhile, Bo Wenlin had also stopped the guards here. Otherwise, how could these people possibly be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han did not walk very quickly, and only entered the imperial city after nearly half an hour. Quick, quick, we've captured 2 female assassins, and are just about to execute them in public at the East Gate. They had just entered when they heard the passers-by rushing around to spread the news, looking very excited, which attracted a lot of people to follow them. Female assassins, and there were 2 of them. Could they be Lu Feng and her sister? Ling Han immediately changed his route, and also headed in the direction of the East Gate. How had these 2 women leaked their identities and whereabouts, and actually ended up in the hands of the imperial family? He quickened his pace slightly, and it was only a matter of 1 or 2 minutes before he arrived at the East Gate. He saw that a high platform had been set up in a public square, and there were currently 2 women pressed down on the execution rack. Their hair was disheveled, and it was not clear what they looked like. However, with Ling Han's understanding of the aura of these 2 women, he was sure that they were the Lu sisters. Were these 2 really made to be assassins? On the side, there were people loudly announcing the crimes of these 2 women. They had assassinated an important official of the imperial court, Na Zhiyan, and had offended the might of heaven. Now they would be executed in public as a warning to others. To execute these 2 beauties in public, and with such speed at that, it must have been because the Fire Emperor had forcefully excavated the mine, causing the people to seethe with discontent. Thus, he had deliberately executed these 2 women in such a high-profile manner to suppress the rebellious sentiments of the whole nation, especially in the imperial capital. Assassinated Na Zhiyan Pei. Then these 2 girls must be good people. The heavens are blind. They actually didn't kill that damn Na Zhiyan, and instead killed 2 good people. Shu, lower your voice, do you not want your life anymore? The crowd discussed animatedly. They all expressed sympathy for Lu Feng and her sister, and hated Na Zhiyan to the bone. Ling Han did not immediately move to save them. He wanted the 2 women to learn from their mistakes and not become assassins in future. They were not made to be assassins at all. Bo Wenlin naturally came over as well. He could not help but look shocked. This person who was about to die actually still had the mood to carry out an execution? How thick of a nerve did he have to have? The time has come, execute. An executioner walked onto the platform. He was bare-chested, and in his hand was a gigantic machete. He took a sip of wine, and then sprayed it onto the blade of the machete. He raised it high up in the air, and the blade of the machete reflected a sorrowful color under the setting sun. The cultivation level of Lu Feng and her sister had obviously been sealed, and for the majority of martial artists, if their cultivation level was sealed, they would not be able to circulate their origin power to protect their bodies. Thus, their defensive ability was actually not much higher than that of a normal person. This executioner was an element-gathering tier. With a single slash, one of the sisters' heads would definitely roll to the ground. Shua, the machete slashed down. But the imagined scene of a severed head falling to the ground and blood splattering did not appear. Instead, a young man suddenly appeared on the platform, and used a single hand to stop the descending machete. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.